My son handed me a 5-day luxury island vacation and smiled warmly. "You deserve this, Dad," he said. At the time, those words sounded loving, until I rushed home for the heart medication I'd forgotten. Standing outside the door, I heard him laugh and say coldly, "It's a one-way ticket. The old man won't be coming back." In that moment, everything changed. I still boarded the ferry, but not as his victim. I went to the island to make sure that ticket would mark the beginning of his downfall. Welcome to today's story. Before we dive in, take a moment to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new episode. I'd also love to know where you're listening from. Drop your city or country in the comments below and join our growing community. One quick note, this story includes some fictionalized elements created for storytelling purposes. Any similarities to real people or events are purely coincidental, but the lessons behind the story are worth hearing. My name is Elliot Grayson. I'm 67 years old, a retired math teacher, and until that Wednesday in late May, I truly believed that my son loved me. The gift arrived 2 weeks earlier in the afternoon mail. A cream-colored envelope with gold trim sat neatly among the bills and grocery flyers. At first I thought it was some sort of advertisement the kind retirement communities like to send. But when I opened it, I found something very different inside. It was a printed itinerary. 5 days at Serenity Island Resort, a luxury retreat tucked along the Florida Gulf Coast. Ocean View Villa, all meals included. Ferry transportation already arranged. Every expense had been paid. At the bottom of the page was a small handwritten note. "Dad, you deserve this. Love, Logan." I remember sitting at my kitchen table for a long time, holding that card in my hands. The kitchen window was open, and the late spring air carried the faint scent of cut grass from the neighbor's yard. That kitchen had been the heart of my life for decades. It was where I had raised Logan after his mother died, where I packed his school lunches, where I helped him with math homework late at night, where I sat grading student papers long after he'd gone to bed. It was also the house I nearly lost once. After my wife passed, money had been tight. I'd taken a second job tutoring evenings just to keep the mortgage paid. Some nights I didn't get home until nearly midnight. But it had been worth it, because every sacrifice had been for Logan. And now holding that card in my hands, I thought, maybe he understood that. Maybe all those years had meant something after all. I was wrong. The morning I left for the island started before sunrise. I've always been the kind of man who arrives early for everything. Old habits from 35 years of teaching, I suppose. When you spend your life telling teenagers not to be late, you start holding yourself to the same rule. The ferry was scheduled to leave at 9. By 7:30, I was already in a cab heading toward the terminal, my duffel bag resting beside me. The city streets were quiet, the early morning light soft and gray. For the first time in years, I felt strangely light. 5 days away. 5 days with nothing to worry about. No bills, no repairs, no responsibilities. Just rest. But halfway to the harbor, a thought struck me, like a sudden cold wind. My heart medication. The orange bottle had been sitting on the bathroom counter when I brushed my teeth. I remembered seeing it, and then I remembered leaving it there. "Could you turn around?" I asked the driver. He glanced at me through the rearview mirror. "Forgot something." Medication. He nodded and made a quick turn at the next intersection. 10 minutes later, we were idling in front of my house again. "I'll be 2 minutes," I told him. I stepped out, unlocked the door, and walked inside. The house was quiet. Too quiet. Then I heard a voice. Logan's voice. It was coming from the kitchen. Loud, clear, speakerphone. I stopped walking. My first instinct was to call out to let him know I was home, but something in his tone made me hesitate. It was sharp, impatient, not the careful, respectful voice he usually used when speaking to me. I stood just outside the kitchen doorway, hidden behind the half-open door, and listened. "It's done," Logan said. My heart skipped. "He's leaving this morning, one-way ticket. The resort ferry only runs once a week. He doesn't know I never booked the return." There was a pause. "He'll figure it out Thursday, maybe Friday," Logan continued. "By then, it'll be too late." A woman's voice answered. "Sophia, my daughter-in-law." Her tone was calm, businesslike. "And your man on the island?" "Already in place," Logan said. "He'll wait until the 4th night. Make it look like an accident. Heart attack, maybe a fall. Nobody questions an old man who falls overboard." My lungs forgot how to breathe. "How much?" Sophia asked. Logan didn't hesitate. 800,000. He said it like he was discussing the price of groceries. 350 from life insurance, he continued. 450 from the house. Sophia was silent for a moment. Then she said, "Good." Another pause. We'll be in Mexico before anyone even starts asking questions." Logan laughed. It was a sound I had never heard from him before. Cold, satisfied, empty, the easiest money I'll ever make. The hallway seemed to tilt beneath my feet. I pressed one hand against the wall to steady myself. My heart was pounding so hard, it felt like it might burst through my ribs. For a moment, I almost stepped into the kitchen, almost demanded answers, almost shouted his name. But I didn't, because in that moment, standing in the hallway of the house I had worked 2 jobs to keep, I understood something. If I confronted him right then, he would deny everything. He would say I misunderstood, that it was a joke, that I was imagining things, and I would have nothing, no evidence, no recording, just the word of a 67-year-old man against his own son. So instead, I turned around. I walked down the hallway. I picked up the orange bottle from the bathroom counter, and I left. The cab driver was still sitting in the driveway, scrolling through something on his phone when I climbed back inside. "Got it?" he asked. "Yeah," I said quietly. "I got it." The ride to the harbor was silent. I stared out the window while the city passed by, my thoughts racing in circles. I considered calling the police. But what would I tell them? That I'd overheard a conversation? They would ask for proof. They would ask why I hadn't recorded it. And while they asked questions, Logan would be destroying every piece of evidence he had. So instead, I made a different call. Howard Brennan, the lawyer who had helped me draft my will 3 years earlier. He answered on the second ring. "Elliot," he said. "Everything all right?" "No," I told him. "It's not." I told him everything. About the conversation. Or about the one-way ferry ticket. About the plan to stage my death. When I finished, Howard didn't speak for several seconds. When he finally did, his voice was tight. "Elliot, you need to go to the police and tell them what I asked, that my son plans to kill me. They'll want evidence," I continued, "and if I accuse Logan now, he'll destroy whatever evidence exists." Howard sighed. "So, what are you thinking?" "I'm going to the island," I said. "Elliot, I need to know who he hired. I need proof." There was a long pause on the line. Then Howard said quietly, "You're walking into a trap." Maybe I said, "But if I don't go, I'll never be able to prove what he did." Another silence. Finally, Howard said, "I know someone, former Coast Guard, private security now. His name's Victor Bennett. If I can reach him," Howard continued, "I'll get him to the island before you arrive." "Thank you." "Elliot," Howard said, carefully, "you don't have to do this." I stared out the cab window at the approaching harbor. "Yes," I said, "I do." When I hung up, the ferry was already boarding. Families carried coolers and beach chairs up the ramp. Couples held hands. Retirees wore wide sun hats and carried paperback novels. People going on vacation. People expecting 5 peaceful days in paradise. I walked among them with my duffel bag slung over one shoulder. I found a seat near the back of the ferry, far from the chatter and laughter. The engine roared to life. Slowly the boat pulled away from the dock. The shoreline grew smaller. The city faded into distant gray shapes along the horizon. I watched it disappear, and I thought about Logan, his 8th birthday. I had worked a double shift that day. Came home with $20 in tips, just enough to buy the remote control car he'd been begging for. When he opened the box, his face lit up, like I had given him the world. He hugged me so tight I could barely breathe. "Best dad ever," he had said. The memory hit me like a wave. I closed my eyes as salt spray touched my face. Somewhere ahead of us, beyond the open water, Serenity Island waited. And somewhere on that island was a man my son had hired to end my life. Logan believed I didn't know. He believed I would step onto that island grateful and unsuspecting. But he was wrong, because I knew the truth now. And as the ferry carried me farther from the mainland, I made myself a promise. I wasn't going to die on that island. I was going to survive. And when this was over, I was going to make sure my son answered for what he had done. The ferry horn sounded low across the water. I opened my eyes and stared out at the endless blue horizon. And for the first time in my life, I wondered whether I would live long enough to see the mainland again. The ferry sliced steadily through the open Gulf water, carrying me farther away from everything that had once felt certain in my life. The mainland had already faded into a pale gray blur behind us. Ahead stretched nothing but blue horizon and the promise of an island my son had carefully chosen for me. Near the bow, families leaned against the railings, laughing and taking pictures. A little girl squealed with delight as a pair of seagulls glided beside the boat wings, flashing white in the sunlight. Her father lifted her up so she could see better. The sound of their laughter drifted down the deck. I sat alone near the stern, My phone was pressed against my ear as I waited for Howard Brennan to call me back. The wind tugged lightly at my jacket while the ferry engine hummed beneath my feet. When my screen finally lit up, I answered instantly. Howard. Elliot. His voice sounded tight, strained. I just spoke with Victor Bennett. He's willing to help you, but listen to me. This is madness. Turn that ferry around and go straight to the police. I leaned forward, slightly lowering my voice. A man sitting 2 rows ahead glanced back at me briefly, then returned to reading his newspaper. I already told you, I said quietly. I don't have evidence. I didn't record the conversation. If I walk into a police station and accuse my own son of planning to harm me, they'll ask for proof. And while they're asking questions, Logan will know I heard him. Howard exhaled slowly, and then he asked. Then he destroys whatever evidence exists, I said. By the time anyone investigates, there will be nothing left. You'll still be alive, Howard replied firmly. I stared out across the restless water. Will I? I asked softly. If Logan realizes I suspect him, what stops him from moving the plan forward? If he knows I heard that call, he won't wait 4 days. The line went quiet. I could hear Howard breathing slowly as though he were trying to steady himself. You're walking directly into a trap, he said at last. No, I answered. I'm turning the trap around. Another long pause followed. When Howard spoke again, his voice had changed. It carried reluctant acceptance now. Victor Bennett will take the afternoon ferry, he said. He'll check into the resort under his own name and act like any other guest. He won't approach you unless it becomes necessary. Former Coast Guard, Howard continued. 20 years. Private security work since then. If anyone can quietly keep watch over you, it's him. Thank you, I said. I'm also hiring someone else, Howard added. Marcus Reed, private investigator. Used to specialize in white-collar fraud. I want him digging into Logan's finances immediately. That's good, I said. If Logan is planning something like this, it's not random. There has to be a reason. There always is, Howard replied grimly. Debt, gambling, loans, something pushing him to desperation. Marcus will find it. I nodded slowly even though Howard couldn't see me. I need to know exactly what I'm dealing with. Elliot, Howard said, his tone softening again. You still don't have to do this. I looked out across the endless water stretching toward the horizon. Yes, I said quietly. I do. I ended the call and lowered the phone slowly. Around me, the ferry was alive with easy vacation chatter. Couples talked about beach reservations. Someone opened a cooler full of drinks. A group of retirees debated which restaurant they planned to try first. No one looked at me. No one knew what I had just discovered, and no one knew what waited for me on that island. My thoughts drifted back to the last real conversation I'd had with Logan. It had been 6 months earlier. I'd driven to his house with a small bag of tomatoes I'd picked up at the farmer's market. Logan used to love those tomatoes when he was a kid. Said they tasted better than the ones from the grocery store. I used the spare key and stepped inside. Logan was standing in the kitchen, pacing back and forth, with his phone pressed against his ear. He hadn't noticed me yet. I don't care what it takes, he was saying, his voice tight with frustration. I need that money in 2 weeks. 2 weeks? Do you understand me? He turned and saw me standing there. For a split second, his face went completely pale. He ended the call immediately and forced a smile. Dad. Hey, I didn't know you were coming. I held up the bag of tomatoes. Just thought I'd stop by. He took the bag from my hand and set it on the counter without even glancing inside. Thanks, he said quickly. Sorry about that. Work stuff. Stressful client. I nodded. I didn't push him for answers. I wanted to believe him. But I had seen the panic in his eyes. After that day, other things began to change. Logan stopped coming to dinner. At first, it was once a week instead of twice, then once every couple of weeks. Eventually, he stopped visiting altogether. Whenever I called, the conversations grew shorter. 5 minutes, sometimes less. There was always some excuse. Work, meetings, travel. I told myself it was normal. Adult children had busy lives, but somewhere deep inside, I knew something wasn't right. Now sitting on this ferry with wind brushing my face and the smell of salt filling the air, I finally understood. He hadn't been drifting away. He had been preparing for months, not weeks, months. My son, the boy I had raised alone, the child I had worked endless hours to support, had spent that time carefully planning how to end my life. And every time he saw me, he had smiled. Something inside my chest cracked, not my heart exactly, something deeper, something older. But I didn't let myself break apart. Not here, not yet. Instead, I unlocked my phone and opened my messages. Logan's last text appeared on the screen. "Booked you something special, Dad. You've earned it." I stared at those words for a long moment. Then I typed a reply. "Just boarded the ferry. Thank you again, son. Can't wait." I pressed send. Let him believe I was still the trusting father he expected. Let him believe I would arrive on that island, grateful, relaxed, and completely unaware. Because when this was finished, when I had gathered proof, when I knew who he had hired and how the plan worked, then Logan would understand something he had never expected. His father was not the easy victim he imagined. The ferry horn sounded loudly across the water. I looked up. The island had appeared on the horizon now, a dark shape rising from the sea. Serenity Island, the place my son had selected as the final chapter of my life. Passengers stood and moved toward the railings, pointing toward the approaching shoreline. I rose slowly and lifted my duffel bag from the seat. Victor Bennett would arrive on the afternoon ferry. Somewhere on that island, a man I had never met was preparing to quietly protect me. And somewhere else, another stranger, someone my son had paid, was waiting for the right moment to kill me. 2 men, one hunting, one guarding, and I was walking directly between them. I opened the voice memo application on my phone and tested the microphone. If I was going to survive this, I needed to be ready for anything. The ferry slowed as it approached the dock. Ahead, I could see white villas scattered across the hillside, and tall palm trees swaying in the warm breeze. It looked beautiful, peaceful, like a postcard. But I knew better. The boat nudged gently against the wooden pier. A resort employee in a crisp white shirt waved cheerfully as passengers began to disembark. "Welcome to Serenity Island." I stepped onto the dock, the solid wood firm beneath my feet. I was 67 years old. I had spent my entire life trying to be kind, patient, and forgiving. But kindness wasn't going to keep me alive here. So I squared my shoulders, walked past the smiling employee, and made myself a promise. I would survive this island, and when I finally left it, my son would answer for everything he had done. The wooden dock felt firm beneath my feet, steadier than anything had felt in the last 24 hours. I stepped off the ferry behind a cheerful family, hauling beach bags and plastic buckets, their children already racing toward the strip of white sand beyond the pier. Warm air wrapped around the island, carrying the scent of saltwater sunscreen and something faintly floral hibiscus perhaps. It was the kind of place people dreamed about when they imagined paradise. But I didn't believe in paradise anymore. A young woman in a crisp white polo stood at the base of the pier, holding a clipboard and greeting each arriving guest with a radiant smile. Her name tag read, Linda. "Welcome to Serenity Island Resort," she said warmly as I approached. She scanned her list and checked off a name. "Mr. Grayson, correct. Your villa is ready. Mr. Flynn will take you there personally." She gestured toward a man standing beside a white resort golf cart a few yards away. He looked to be in his mid-40s, tall and athletic, his skin bronzed by the sun. His smile appeared polished, almost rehearsed. "Elliot Grayson," he called out as I walked over. He extended his hand confidently. "Connor Flynn, resort manager. Pleasure to meet you." I shook his hand. His grip was firm, and practiced the sort meant to inspire immediate trust. "Thanks for having me," I said. "Of course," Connor replied easily. "Your son arranged everything. He told us you've worked hard your whole life and deserved a proper break. We're honored to host you." The word son struck like a small stone dropping into my chest. I kept my expression calm. "Logan can be thoughtful like that," I said evenly. Connor gestured toward the golf cart. "Hop in. I'll give you a quick tour while we head up to your villa. Villa 47 is one of our more secluded units, very quiet, incredible ocean views." We drove along a winding path shaded by tall palms. The resort unfolded around us like the pages of a luxury travel brochure. White villas dotted the hillside, each topped with terracotta roofs glowing beneath the afternoon sun. Beyond them stretched the Gulf, endless luminous blue. "Serenity Island has been family-owned for 30 years, Connor explained as we climbed the hill. "We keep things exclusive, 50 villas total, never more than 100 guests. Ferry runs once a week Saturdays only, keeps the place peaceful." Once a week. I memorized that detail. We passed the main lodge, an open-air building overlooking the water. Guests relaxed in wicker chairs, sipping drinks under colorful umbrellas. A couple laughed while tossing bocce balls on a sand court nearby. Everything about the place radiated ease and comfort. But I hadn't come here for comfort. Connor steered the cart onto a narrower road that curved away from the central villas. The path became quieter as the laughter from the lodge faded behind us. Trees grew thicker on either side of the road. Connor continued pointing out amenities, spa services, beach trails, guided fishing trips, but my attention drifted elsewhere. I was counting distance, counting turns, counting how far we had moved away from other people. At last, the cart stopped in front of a villa, perched near the edge of a rocky bluff. Below it, waves crashed against dark stone. The villa itself looked stunning, white stucco walls, tall windows, and a wide wooden deck facing the sea. 2 chairs sat near the railing, perfectly positioned to watch the sunset. It was beautiful, and completely alone. No neighboring villas nearby, no voices, no signs of other guests, just trees cliffside and the restless ocean. Villa 47, Connor said proudly, one of the best views on the island. I stepped out slowly, studying my surroundings. The narrow path back toward the resort twisted through the trees. The cliff edge stood maybe 20 yards from the deck, close enough to hear the crashing waves, close enough to see the drop, close enough for a fall. Connor unlocked the door and handed me a key. Linda will bring your luggage shortly. If you need anything at all, just dial 0. Our goal is to make your stay perfect. I appreciate that, I replied. Connor climbed back into the golf cart and drove away, leaving the quiet behind him. I stepped inside. The villa looked immaculate, almost staged. A king-size bed dressed in crisp white linens, a small kitchenette stocked with bottled water, and fresh fruit, wide French doors opening onto the deck. Everything designed to make guests forget the outside world. But forgetting wasn't an option for me. I walked to the window and stared out at the ocean. It truly was breathtaking, the kind of view people save money for years to experience. And yet all I could think was, is this the place Logan chose? Is this where someone plans to make me disappear? I checked my phone. No signal. Connor had mentioned that earlier, limited cell service Wi-Fi available only at the main lodge. Isolation by design. Perfect conditions for a trap. I had just started unpacking when I heard footsteps outside. I froze. A moment later, a voice called out, casual and friendly. Beautiful spot, isn't it? I stepped out onto the deck. A man stood on the path below. He looked about 65, lean and weathered, wearing cargo shorts and a faded fishing shirt. His gray hair was cropped close, and his eyes were sharp, too sharp for the relaxed tourist he pretended to be. Sure is, I replied carefully. He grinned and offered his hand. Victor Bennett. Villa 28 up the hill. He nodded toward the trees. Saw you arrive and figured I'd introduce myself. Us older guys have to stick together, right? Recognition flickered instantly. I shook his hand. Elliot Grayson, I said. Victor's smile remained easy, but his eyes briefly swept across the villa and surrounding trees before returning to mine. A silent question. I gave a tiny nod. Well, Elliot, Victor said lightly. If you need anything, fishing advice, restaurant tips, whatever, just let me know. This place gets pretty quiet if you're traveling alone. I'll remember that, I replied. Victor waved casually and walked back up the path, whistling off-key. To anyone watching it, looked like nothing more than 2 strangers exchanging polite greetings. But I knew better. Victor Bennett had arrived. Howard had kept his promise. I went back inside and locked the door behind me. For the first time since hearing Logan's voice in my kitchen that morning, I didn't feel entirely alone. But feeling less alone didn't mean feeling safe. The ferry ran once a week, Saturday. That meant I had 5 days. 5 days to discover who Logan had hired. 5 days to gather proof. 5 days to stay alive. I unpacked carefully, clothes into drawers, toiletries into the bathroom as cabinet, heart medication placed on the bedside table. Then I returned to the deck again. The afternoon sun burned high overhead. Pelicans glided across the horizon. Waves rolled steadily against the rocks below. Everything looked peaceful. Too peaceful. I walked to the edge of the deck and looked down. The cliff dropped sharply 30 feet, at least ending in jagged black rocks and foaming surf. I could immediately see why someone might choose this place for an accident. A stumble, a misstep, a 67-year-old man leaning too far over the railing while admiring the view. The ocean would do the rest. As I stepped back, my hands trembling slightly. Then I felt it, not a sound exactly, more like an instinct. The unmistakable sensation of being watched. I turned slowly, scanning the trees beyond the villa. Nothing moved. No one stood there. But the feeling didn't fade. I returned inside, shut the French doors, and pulled the curtains halfway closed. Then I sat in the chair beside the window, where I could watch the path and the tree line without being easily seen. And I waited. If someone was out there eventually, they would reveal themselves. The villa remained silent, except for the hum of the ceiling fan and the distant rhythm of waves striking the rocks below. As the light shifted across the room, my thoughts returned to Logan, the little boy who once hugged me on his 8th birthday, the man who had laughed about the easiest money he would ever make. He had chosen this island. He had chosen this villa. He had known about the cliffs, which meant whoever he had hired knew too. I picked up my phone and opened the voice memo application. Then I set the phone on the small table beside me ready, because sooner or later, someone would make a move. And when that moment came, I intended to be ready. The afternoon settled over the island with a heavy, almost unnatural stillness. The breeze that had followed the ferry earlier faded, leaving the air thick and quiet. Every small sound seemed amplified, the distant crash of waves below the cliff, the slow creak of palm leaves, the faint hum of the ceiling fan turning above me. I had just finished unpacking and was folding a shirt when my phone vibrated on the bedside table. The screen lit up with a name, Logan. My hand hovered over the phone for a moment. Part of me wanted to let it ring. Ignoring him would be easier than hearing that familiar voice again, but letting it go unanswered might raise suspicion. So I picked it up. "Hey son," I said, forcing a relaxed tone into my voice. "Dad?" Logan answered immediately, his voice warm, almost too warm. "You made it. How's the resort?" I walked slowly toward the window while he spoke. With my free hand, I opened the voice memo app on my phone. My thumb tapped the red record button. Then I set the phone face down on the table beside me. "It's beautiful," I said. "Really beautiful. You didn't have to do all this." "Of course I did," Logan replied quickly. "You've worked your whole life, Dad. You deserve a break." There was a brief pause before he continued. "So, the villa's good. They put you somewhere nice." "Villa 47, I said. "Right at the edge of the property. Amazing view of the water." "Perfect," Logan said. Something in his voice shifted, subtle but unmistakable. Relief, perhaps. Or satisfaction. "That's exactly the one I requested." He added, "Quiet, private. You'll be able to really relax there." "Private." The word echoed inside my head. My eyes drifted toward the deck outside the window, toward the cliff beyond the railing, toward the empty path winding through the trees. "Private, isolated, alone." "It's definitely quiet," I said. "Good. And your heart?" Logan asked suddenly. "You remembered to bring your medication, right?" There it was, the question I had been waiting for. "I did," I said calmly. "It's right here on the nightstand." "That's good," he said quickly. "That's really good." For a moment, his voice sounded genuinely relieved. For half a second, I almost doubted myself. Almost wondered if I had somehow misunderstood the conversation I overheard in my kitchen. Then he continued speaking. "You know, Dad, at your age, you've got to be careful. Heart conditions are serious. Anything could happen. Stress over exertion, even a bad fall." My jaw tightened. He was building a story, planting details, making sure that if anyone ever heard this conversation, they would hear a concerned son warning his elderly father to take it easy. "You've got to take things slow out there," Logan continued. "No pushing yourself." "I'll be careful," I replied. "I mean it," he said. "Don't go hiking those trails or climbing around the rocks. Just relax. Sit on the deck, enjoy the view. Take it easy." "Take it easy. Stay safe." From the man who had arranged for my accident. "I will," I said quietly. "Thanks for looking out for me." "Always, Dad," he said smoothly. "Always." Another short pause followed. "Sophia says hello, by the way." Sophia. The same woman whose voice I had heard over the speakerphone in my kitchen, calmly asking how much money my death would bring. "Tell her I said hi," I said carefully. "Will do." "Hey, I've got a meeting in 10 minutes, so I've got to run. But call me if you need anything, all right?" "I will. Thanks again, Logan." "Love you, Dad." The line went silent. I stood there with the phone still pressed against my ear long after the call ended. Finally, I lowered it and stopped the recording. My hands were shaking. "Love you, Dad." He had sounded convincing, warm, caring. If I hadn't overheard that conversation in my kitchen that morning, I would have believed every word he said. But now I knew better. And now I had it recorded. Logan asking about my heart, warning me to be careful, preparing the story for what would happen next. It wasn't proof of murder. Not yet. But it was a beginning. I had just set the phone down when I heard footsteps outside the villa. Slow, measured, coming closer. Then 3 firm knocks sounded on the door. I opened it. Victor Bennett stood on the porch, hands tucked casually into his pockets, wearing the same easy smile he'd shown earlier. But his eyes were sharp and alert, scanning the trees behind me. "Elliot," he said casually. "Got a minute?" I stepped aside. He entered the villa and I closed the door behind him, turning the lock. Victor walked straight to the window and glanced outside before turning back toward me. The relaxed tourist expression disappeared instantly. "All right," he said quietly. "Let's talk." I nodded. "Howard filled me in," Victor continued. "Your son's planning something. You're here to gather evidence. And I'm here to make sure you stay alive long enough to use it." "That's the short version," I said. "Good," he replied. "Then we understand each other." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small handheld radio. "I've got eyes on this place around the clock," he said. "You don't go anywhere without me knowing. If anyone approaches this villa, I'll see it." "How?" I asked. Victor smiled faintly. "I've been doing this kind of work a long time, Elliot. Trust me." Strangely, I did. "There's something else," Victor said after a moment. My stomach tightened. "I've been here since yesterday," he continued, "learning the layout, watching the guests, and I've already noticed someone." "Who?" I asked. "Don't know his name yet," Victor said, "but he checked in the same day you did. Villa 46. He tilted his head toward the wall, right next door. A cold weight settled in my stomach. "He's been watching you since you arrived," Victor continued calmly. "And he's not here for vacation. Villa 46. Close enough to monitor every movement." "What does he look like?" I asked. "Mid-40s, Victor said. Lean build, military posture, keeps to himself, doesn't talk to the other guests, doesn't eat in the dining hall." He paused. "He's a professional, Elliot, and he's here for a reason." My mouth went dry. "You think he's the one Logan hired?" Victor gave a small nod. "I'd bet money on it." I sat down slowly as the reality settled over me. There was a man in the villa next door, a man hired to harm me, waiting for the right moment. Victor crouched slightly so his eyes met mine. "Listen carefully," he said. "You're not alone in this. I'm here, and I'm not letting anything happen to you." He gestured toward the deck. "But you've got to be smart. No wandering off alone, no night walks, and don't go anywhere near that cliff without me nearby." I nodded. "Good," Victor said. He stood and moved toward the door. "I'm going to keep watching Villa 46, he said. "See who this guy talks to, what he's doing here. You just act normal. Let Logan believe everything is going exactly the way he planned." Victor opened the door, then paused. "You're brave, Elliot," he said quietly. "Coming here, knowing what you know. Most people wouldn't." "I didn't have a choice," I said. Victor studied me for a moment. "Yeah," he said softly, "you did, and you made the right one." He stepped outside and closed the door behind him. I stood there for a moment, listening to his footsteps fade along the path. Then I walked slowly back to the window and looked out at the ocean. Villa 46 sat somewhere beyond the trees. I couldn't see it from here, but I knew it was there. And inside that villa was a man who had come to this island for one reason. I picked up my phone and replayed Logan's voice from the recording. "At your age, you've got to be careful. Anything could happen, even a bad fall." A bad fall. My eyes drifted toward the cliff beyond the deck. And suddenly everything became clear. That was the plan. That was how they intended to do it, and the man in Villa 46 was waiting to make it happen. As the sun dipped lower over the gulf, the ocean slowly transformed from bright blue to shades of copper and molten gold. Long streaks of light shimmered across the water, and the breeze carried the faint scent of salt and flowers from somewhere deeper on the island. Inside Villa 47. I sat at the small wooden desk and spread out the documents Logan had mailed to me. The cream-colored envelope, the printed itinerary, the ferry tickets. I had glanced at them when they first arrived back home, but I hadn't studied them carefully. At the time, I hadn't felt the need to. I had trusted my son. Now, trust wasn't an option. Now I needed to see what I had missed. I picked up the itinerary first. It looked simple and professional, exactly what you would expect from a luxury resort package. 5 days all-inclusive. Check-in Thursday. Check-out Tuesday. Ferry departure Saturday morning, 9 o'clock. Everything appeared perfectly normal. I turned to the ferry tickets. That's when I noticed something strange. There was only one. At first I assumed the second ticket had slipped somewhere else in the envelope. I searched through the pages again, then checked the inside of the envelope itself. Nothing. Just the single ticket. I studied it again, reading the small print twice to be sure. Port Haven to Serenity Island. Thursday, May 22nd. Arrival only. No return. My chest tightened. I went through the documents again, slowly making certain I hadn't overlooked anything, but the answer stayed the same. One ticket. Only one. I picked up my phone and dialed the front desk. Linda answered almost immediately, her cheerful voice, exactly as bright as it had been earlier. "Front desk. This is Linda. How can I help you?" "Hi, Linda. "This is Elliot Grayson in Villa 47, I said. "I was reviewing my travel papers and noticed something. I only received an arrival ferry ticket. Is that normal?" There was a brief pause. I heard the faint clicking of a keyboard. "Let me check your reservation," she said. A few seconds passed. "Oh, you're right," she said. "There's no return ferry booked for your stay." My fingers tightened around the phone. "Is it possible to book one now?" More typing. "Well," Linda said gently, "the ferry only runs once a week, Saturdays at 9 in the morning. This week's departure is already full. Guests usually reserve seats at least 2 weeks ahead of time." I swallowed. When would the next available seat be? She paused again. "Saturday, June 7th. 2 weeks." For a moment, I closed my eyes, forcing myself to stay calm. "Is there any other way off the island?" I asked. "Not normally," she replied. "Serenity Island is pretty remote. The ferry is the regular transportation option. Private charters are possible, but they're expensive, usually several $1,000s. "I understand," I said quietly. "I can place your name on the wait list for this Saturday," she offered, "in case someone cancels." "Yes," I said, "please do that." I thanked her and ended the call. For several seconds I sat there staring at the phone. Logan had planned this carefully. He had booked a one-way trip knowing I wouldn't notice until I arrived, knowing the ferry only ran once a week, knowing I would be trapped here, trapped long enough for the man in Villa 46 to finish the job. I grabbed my jacket and stepped outside. The evening air felt warm against my face as I walked down the narrow path leading toward the beach. Other guests were heading in the opposite direction, toward the lodge for dinner. I went the other way. The beach stretched wide and quiet under the fading sunlight. Waves rolled steadily onto the sand. I walked slowly along the shoreline, hands in my pockets, trying to clear my thoughts. That's when I noticed him. About 50 yards away near the edge of the trees stood a man. He wasn't doing anything unusual, just standing there facing the water. But something about his posture made the back of my neck tighten. He wore a faded blue shirt, khaki pants, and a baseball cap pulled low over his face. Mid-40s. Lean build, disciplined posture, military maybe, and he was watching me. I turned slightly, pretending to look down the beach. When I glanced back again, he hadn't moved, still watching. I began walking back toward my villa. I didn't stare at him directly, but I kept him in my peripheral vision. After a moment, he started walking too, not quickly, not obviously, just following. My pulse picked up. I moved faster along the path leading through the trees. Behind me, I could hear footsteps on the sand, steady, calm, unhurried. I didn't turn around. When I reached my villa, I unlocked the door, quickly stepped inside, and locked it behind me. Then I went straight to the window and parted the curtain just enough to see outside. The man in the blue shirt walked calmly up the path. He passed my villa without looking. Then he stopped, right outside Villa 46. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a key, unlocked the door, and stepped inside. I stood there motionless. That was him. The man Victor had warned me about. The professional. The one Logan had hired. I grabbed my phone and texted Victor. "Just saw him. Blue shirt. Followed me from the beach. He's in Villa 46 now." The reply came almost instantly. "I know. I saw. Stay inside. Lock the door. I'm watching." I returned to the window. Villa 46 was only about 30 feet away, through a thin line of trees and brush. From my angle, I could see part of the deck and a soft light glowing inside the villa. Then the door opened. The man stepped outside. He held a water bottle in one hand. For a moment, he simply stood there looking at the ocean. Then he turned and looked directly toward my window. I froze. The curtain was drawn and the room was dark, so he shouldn't have been able to see me. But the way he stared made it feel like he could. Like he knew exactly where I was standing. Like he was measuring the distance, calculating. He took a slow sip from the bottle, set it on the railing, and leaned against a wooden post with his arms crossed, just watching. Minutes passed. 5, maybe 10. I stayed hidden in the shadows while he stood on his deck silently observing my villa. Finally, he picked up the bottle, turned around, and went back inside. I let out a long breath. I sat in the chair near the window and waited. Night settled slowly across the island. The ocean murmured below the cliff, and somewhere in the darkness, a bird cried out. Through the trees, I could still see the faint glow of light coming from Villa 46. He was there, 30 feet away, close enough to reach me, close enough to finish what Logan had started, but not tonight. Tonight I was still alive, still gathering evidence. I looked at the ferry ticket lying on the desk. One way, no return. Logan had trapped me here. He thought I was helpless, But he didn't know Victor was watching. He didn't know I was recording everything. And he didn't know the man he believed was an easy victim was sitting in the dark watching the hunter he had hired, planning his next move. I opened the voice memo app and began recording. "Thursday evening," I said quietly. 6:30 p.m. Confirm no return ferry ticket. Next available ferry, June 7th, 2 weeks away. I'm trapped here. I paused. Observed subject from Villa 46. Blue shirt. Follow me from beach to villa. Currently monitoring my movements. Victor Bennett also observing. I ended the recording and saved it. Then I looked back toward Villa 46. The light was still on. And I wondered how long it would take before the man next door decided it was time to act. And when that moment came, would I be ready? The next morning arrived quietly carried in on the steady rhythm of waves and the pale gray light of dawn slipping through the curtains. I hadn't slept much. Every creak in the villa, every whisper of wind through the trees had snapped me awake. My mind had refused to rest, but the night had passed and I was still alive, which meant Andrei Volkov was still waiting. I dressed quickly and stepped outside. The island was peaceful at that hour. Only a handful of early guests were awake, one man jogging slowly along the path, another sitting on a bench with a cup of coffee staring out at the water. I walked down toward the beach. Victor Bennett was already there, standing at the edge of the shoreline, with his hands in his pockets, looking exactly like any other tourist enjoying the sunrise. When he noticed me approaching, he gave a small nod and began walking down the beach. I fell into step beside him. "Rough night?" he asked quietly. "You could say that," I replied. We walked along the water in silence for a minute, putting distance between ourselves and the resort buildings behind us. When we were far enough away, Victor stopped. "I've got more information about your neighbor," he said. I turned toward him. "His name's Andrei Volkov," Victor continued. "Former military, dishonorably discharged about 8 years ago. After that, he went freelance." "What kind of freelance?" I asked. Victor gave me a flat look. "The kind that doesn't show up on tax returns," he said. "The kind people hire when they want a problem handled quietly." My stomach tightened. "He's good, Elliot. Careful, professional. Which means if we're going to beat him, we have to be smarter." "What's the plan?" I asked. "Tonight," Victor said. "The resort's hosting a beach bonfire. Music, food, drinks, the whole guest list will be there. You're going to attend." "Why?" "Because I want you visible," he said. "Talking to people, drinking something, being seen. And while I'm doing that, I'll be at your villa," Victor said. "I'm setting up a camera system. If Volkov decides to move while you're gone, we'll have everything recorded." "You think he'll try tonight?" I asked. Victor shrugged slightly. "He's been studying your routine for 2 days," he said, "waiting for the right moment. A busy night when no one's paying attention. Tonight fits that description perfectly." We resumed walking slowly along the shoreline. "There's something else you should know," Victor added. "What Connor Flynn, the resort manager?" I asked. Victor nodded. "I don't trust him." "Why not?" "Because he assigned you Villa 47, Victor said, right next door to Volkov." The realization hit me like a cold wave. "The resort has 50 villas," Victor continued. "At least half were empty when you arrived. Flynn could have placed you anywhere on the property." "But he didn't," I said quietly. "No," Victor replied. "He put you directly beside the man who's here to harm you." I felt a heavy weight settle in my chest. "You think Flynn's involved?" I asked. "I think someone inside this resort tipped Volkov off," Victor said. "Someone gave him information about where you'd be staying. Flynn has access to that kind of information." Before I could respond, my phone buzzed in my pocket. "Howard, I need to take this," I said. Victor stepped a few paces away, giving me space. I answered the call. "Howard." "Elliot," he said quickly. "How are you holding up? I'm still here." "Good. Listen carefully." Marcus Reed finished his preliminary investigation. "I just emailed you the report, but I want to tell you the important parts first." I heard the soft ping of an incoming message on my phone. "Logan's in serious trouble," Howard said grimly. "He owes $285,000 in gambling debts." The number made my chest tighten. "Spread across 3 lenders," Howard continued. "High-interest loans. The kind people take when they're desperate." $285,000, I repeated. "And that's just," Logan Howard said. "Sophia's carrying $95,000 in credit card debt. Maxed out accounts." I closed my eyes. $380,000. That's what had driven them here. "That's not all," Howard continued. "Marcus found a loan application filed in your name. Someone tried to take out a $450,000 home equity loan against your house. That's impossible, I said. I never signed anything. I know. The bank flagged it. But the paperwork includes your signature. It's a forgery, I said. Marcus thinks so too, Howard replied. He's having it analyzed. But Elliot, this tells us something important. That Logan's been planning this for a long time, I said quietly. Yes, Howard said. Months at least. I thought about the calm way Logan had spoken on the phone, the way he had laughed. Send me everything Marcus has, I said. I will. Just be careful, Elliot. These people are desperate. I know. I ended the call. Victor walked back over. Bad news, he asked. Logan owes $285,000 in gambling debts, I said. Sophia owes $95,000 on credit cards. They even tried to forge a loan on my house. Victor let out a low whistle. That's motive. That's desperation, I said. For a moment, we stood there silently listening to the waves. My mind drifted back 20 years to Logan's college graduation. I had taken a day off work, driven 4 hours to the ceremony, and sat in the bleachers with a disposable camera in my hand. Afterward, he had found me in the crowd and wrapped me in a hug. I couldn't have done this without you, Dad, he had said. At the time I believed him. Now I wasn't sure he had ever meant it. Elliot. Victor's voice pulled me back. You still with me? I nodded. Yeah, good, he said. Because we've got work to do. He looked toward the resort buildings in the distance. Tonight you're going to that bonfire, he said. You're going to smile, drink a beer, and talk to everyone you can. You'll be the most visible guest on the island, and while I'm doing that, I'll be watching your villa. Victor said, if Volkov moves, we catch him. And if Flynn is involved, we catch him too. And if nothing happens, I asked. Then we wait another day, Victor said. But one way or another, this ends soon. He looked directly at me. You've got 5 days on this island, Elliot. We're going to make them count. For the first time since stepping onto Serenity Island, I felt something stir inside me. Hope. All right, I said. Victor nodded. Get some rest. Eat something. Tonight's going to be long. And, Elliot, don't go back to your villa alone until I give the all clear. Understood. Victor walked back toward the resort, moving casually along the beach like any other guest enjoying the morning. I remained there for a while longer, watching the sun rise higher as the ocean slowly turned from gray to bright blue. $285,000. That was the price my son had placed on my life. Not love, not family, just money. Eventually, I returned to my villa and locked the door behind me. Tonight, there would be a bonfire. Tonight, we would set the trap. And somewhere in Villa 46, Andrei Volkov was waiting. But this time, he wasn't the only one planning. The afternoon heat settled heavily over Villa 47, pressing against the windows and walls like an invisible weight. The air outside shimmered under the tropical sun, and even inside with the ceiling fan turning slowly above me, the heat felt suffocating. I had spent most of the day at the small desk near the window, carefully reading through the report Marcus Reed had sent. The documents were spread across the surface in neat rows. Bank statements, loan summaries, credit reports. Every page told the same story. Logan was drowning. $285,000 in gambling debt. The numbers stared back at me in cold black ink. High-interest lenders, short repayment deadlines. The kind of loans people only take when they have no other options left. Desperation. I was studying a set of credit card statements when my phone suddenly rang. The number on the screen was unfamiliar. For a moment I hesitated. Then Victor's voice echoed in my mind. Act normal. I answered the call while opening the voice memo app and placing the phone on the desk with the speaker on. Hello, Dad. The voice was instantly recognizable, warm, cheerful, almost too sweet. Sophia. I'm so glad I caught you, she continued brightly. How are you? How's the island treating you? I forced my voice to sound relaxed. Sophia. Hi, I'm doing well. The island's beautiful. Oh, that's such a relief, she said quickly. Logan's been worried about you all day. There was a short pause. Logan told me about your heart medication, she added. You remembered to bring it right. My jaw tightened slightly. She wasn't asking out of concern. She was confirming a detail. I brought it, I said calmly. It's sitting right here on the nightstand. Oh, good, she said with a soft laugh. That's very important. Missing even one dose can be dangerous, especially at your age. Heat stress, overexertion. It all adds up. I could practically hear the script forming in her mind. Heart attack, natural causes. I'm being careful, I replied. Good. I'm glad to hear that. She shifted the conversation smoothly. So, tell me, what are your plans for tonight? Anything exciting? I kept my tone casual. The resort is hosting a bonfire on the beach tonight. I might go check it out. A bonfire, Sophia said brightly. That sounds wonderful. What time does it start? 8 o'clock, I think. Perfect. She hesitated for just a moment before asking the next question. And you'll probably stay there most of the evening. The question lingered in the air, too precise, too intentional. Probably, I said. Why do you ask? Oh, no reason at all, she replied quickly. I just want to make sure you're enjoying yourself. You deserve it after everything you've done for us. I forced a small chuckle. I appreciate that. Well, I won't keep you any longer, she said. But call us if you need anything. All right, I will. Thanks, Sophia. Love you, Dad. The call ended. I remained sitting there, staring at the phone for several seconds. Then I stopped the recording and saved the file. My hands were shaking slightly. I opened my messages and typed quickly. Need to talk now. Victor's reply came almost immediately. Beach, 5 minutes. Victor was waiting near the shoreline when I arrived. The late afternoon sun had begun drifting toward the horizon, and the waves rolled slowly against the sand. To anyone watching, he looked like another guest enjoying the ocean view. When I approached, he nodded toward the trees. What happened? I handed him my phone. Sophia called, I said. Victor listened carefully to the recording, his expression tightening as the conversation played out. When it ended, he listened again. Then he handed the phone back. She's running the operation, he said quietly. I frowned. What do you mean? Listen to the questions she asked. Victor explained. She wasn't checking on you. She was confirming logistics. Logistics. She wanted to know if you'd be at the bonfire, he said. What time it starts, whether you'd stay there all evening. He met my eyes. That's planning. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed again. Marcus Reed. I answered immediately and placed the call on speaker. Elliot, Marcus said quickly, I've got something important. What is it? I've been analyzing Sophia's phone records, he said. Over the past 2 weeks, she's made 17 calls to a number registered to Serenity Island Resort. Victor stepped closer. Whose number? I asked. Connor Flynn, Marcus said. Victor and I exchanged a long glance. The most recent call happened 2 days before you arrived, Marcus continued. May 20th. The exact day Logan had handed me the envelope with the tickets. Marcus, Victor said, leaning toward the phone. This is Victor Bennett. Have you found any financial transactions between Sophia and Flynn? I'm still working on that, Marcus replied. But there's something else you should know. What Sophia Grayson isn't her original name. My stomach dropped. What do you mean? She legally changed it 9 years ago, Marcus explained. Her birth name was Jennifer Walsh. The name felt unfamiliar. Jennifer Walsh was married once before Marcus continued. Her husband's name was Brian Walsh. Was I asked? Brian Walsh died 8 years ago, Marcus said quietly. Official cause of death drowning. Boating accident. My chest tightened. He had a life insurance policy worth $200,000, Marcus added. Sophia was the sole beneficiary. For a moment, the sound of the ocean disappeared. The world seemed to tilt sideways. The case was ruled accidental, Marcus said. But the detective assigned to it noted several inconsistencies in Sophia's statement. Inconsistencies, I repeated. Yes. Not enough evidence to press charges, but enough to raise suspicions. The implication was clear. Sophia Jennifer Walsh had done this before. Marcus, I said, slowly, send me everything you have on Brian Walsh. You'll have it within 10 minutes, he replied. The call ended. Victor and I stood silently for several moments. She's done this before, I said quietly. Victor nodded. Looks that way, and Flynn's helping her, most likely. Victor looked toward the cliffs near my villa. She called you today for a reason, he said. To confirm I'd be at the bonfire. Exactly, Victor said. If you're there surrounded by people, they can control the timing. So, when I go back to the villa, he finished the sentence. Volkov will be waiting. I looked toward the distant ridge where Villa 46 sat hidden among the trees. How will they explain it? I asked. Victor shrugged slightly. Simple, he said. You leave the bonfire, you return to your villa, you step out onto the deck to enjoy the view. He gestured toward the cliff. And you lean a little too far. A fall, 30 feet down onto jagged rocks. They'll say I was drunk, I murmured. Or tired, Victor added. Or dizzy from your heart condition. And Sophia will cry at my funeral. Victor's voice was flat. and she and Logan will collect $800,000. Silence hung between us. Except, we'll know the truth, I said. Victor nodded once. Except us. He checked his watch. The bonfire starts at 8, he said. That gives us about 5 hours. What's the plan? I'm setting cameras inside your villa, he explained. Hidden angles. If Volkov enters, we'll have everything on tape. And you, I'll position myself where I can see both your villa and his. If he moves, I'll know. I took a slow breath. What do you need me to do? Go to the bonfire, Victor said. Be visible. Talk to people. Drink something. Stay there until I send the all clear. And if something goes wrong, Victor's eyes hardened. Do not go back to your villa alone, he said firmly. Not under any circumstances? I nodded. Understood. Victor turned and began walking back toward the resort. I remained by the shoreline for several minutes staring at the water. Sophia Grayson, Jennifer Walsh, the woman who had called me dad with that sugary voice, the woman who had already buried one husband. I finally turned and walked back toward my villa. The sun burned against my back as the afternoon stretched toward evening. Tonight, there would be a bonfire. Tonight, there would be a trap. And tomorrow, if everything went right, we would have the proof we needed. Sophia Grayson, Connor Flynn, Andrei Volkov, and Logan. But first, I had to survive the night. The bonfire blazed against the deepening night flames, leaping and curling as the ocean breeze pushed them sideways. Tiki torches flickered along the sand, casting long golden shadows across the beach. Near the shoreline, a steel drum band played bright rhythmic music that floated over the sound of the waves. Guests gathered everywhere, laughing, dancing, holding drinks in colorful cups. The entire scene looked like something out of a travel magazine, carefree, warm, effortless. I walked straight into the middle of it. I forced a smile onto my face, forced my shoulders to relax, forced myself to look like a man who had absolutely nothing on his mind. But inside my heart was pounding so hard, it felt like it might shake my ribs apart. A server approached carrying a tray of drinks. She handed me a coconut shell filled with something sweet and bright, a tiny paper umbrella sticking out of the top. Enjoy the evening, she said. Thank you. I moved closer to the bonfire where the flames lit my face. I needed to stay visible. Anyone looking across the beach had to see me standing there alive and relaxed. A couple waved from nearby. Hey there, the man called. You here alone? I walked over and they introduced themselves as Tom and Linda from Ohio. We chatted about the resort, the weather, how beautiful the island was. Tom cracked a joke about how he'd already eaten enough seafood to last a lifetime. Linda laughed and nudged him with her elbow. When she asked if I had come alone, I kept my answer simple. Just me, I said. My son gave me this trip as a gift. Well, he made a good choice, Tom said, lifting his drink. Here's to relaxing. We tapped our coconut shells together. I took a sip, letting the sweetness settle on my tongue. From the outside, I looked like any other guest enjoying a warm island evening. But 30 yards up the hill, Victor Bennett was inside my villa, and somewhere nearby, Andrei Volkov was watching. After a few minutes, I excused myself and drifted toward the band. A tall man with curly hair was teaching a few guests basic salsa steps. He spotted me lingering nearby. Hey, don't be shy, he said with a grin. I'm Nathan. You look like you've got rhythm. I laughed lightly. I'm not so sure about that. Just then my phone vibrated in my pocket. I pulled it out carefully, tilting the screen so no one else could see. A message from Victor. He's moving. My breath caught for a moment. I glanced instinctively toward the dark hillside, where Villa 47 sat hidden among trees. Then I forced my attention back to Nathan. You okay? He asked. You look a little pale. Just warm, I said quickly. I'm going to grab some water. I stepped away from the group and read the message again. He's moving. My thumb trembled as I typed, where Victor's reply came almost instantly. Left Villa 46 3 minutes ago, heading toward yours. Cameras live. Torres is in position. Sam Torres, the head of resort security. Victor had brought him into the plan earlier that afternoon and shown him the evidence we had collected. Torres hadn't needed much convincing. I slowly scanned the crowd. Connor Flynn stood near the bar area, speaking with a couple of guests. His smile looked as polished and professional as ever. He had no idea we knew. My phone buzzed again. He's at your door. Master key. Flynn gave it to him. Master key. A flash of anger surged through my chest. Connor Flynn had personally handed Andrei Volkov the key to my villa. No forced entry, No broken lock. Just a quiet, clean accident waiting to happen. I looked back toward the bar. Connor was laughing at something one of the guests had said. He looked perfectly calm, perfectly innocent. I typed another message. Torres ready? Victor responded almost immediately. Waiting. Let him get inside. Need him on camera. Let him get inside. That meant Andrei Volkov was standing at my door right now, opening it, stepping into the room where I had slept. I slipped the phone back into my pocket and took a slow sip from my drink. Nearby, a woman was telling me about her grandchildren visiting Disney World. I nodded and smiled, pretending to listen. But inside my head, I was counting seconds. My phone buzzed again. He's inside. Camera has him. Torres moving now. I released a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. The trap was closing. Every instinct in my body wanted to sprint up the hill and see it with my own eyes. But I couldn't. Not yet. I needed to stay exactly where I was visible, surrounded by witnesses. So, I stayed. I stood by the fire and talked to strangers about travel and music, while just 30 yards away, Sam Torres and his security team surrounded Andrei Volkov. Time crawled forward. October 22nd. October 25th. 10:27. My phone buzzed. Got him. I stared at the words. Secured. Torres has him in custody. Flynn next. I lifted my head and scanned the beach again. Connor Flynn still stood near the bar. Then I saw Sam Torres approaching him. Torres walked casually. Hands relaxed, his expression calm. He said something to Connor. Connor nodded, still smiling. Torres gestured toward the main lodge. Connor hesitated slightly. Torres spoke again quietly. Connor's smile faltered. Torres lifted his radio. 2 security guards appeared from the darkness. Connor's face drained of color. Most of the guests didn't even notice, but I did. I watched as Torres and the guards escorted Connor away from the bonfire toward the main building, and I knew. It was over. My phone buzzed once more. Both in custody. Come back when you're ready. I'll wait for you. I checked my watch. 10:29, less than 3 hours. 3 hours earlier, Andrei Volkov had been free. Now he was in custody. The resort manager who helped him was in custody. And I was still standing. I set the coconut drink on a nearby table and quietly stepped away from the fire. The music faded behind me as I walked up the path toward my villa. When I reached Villa 47, the door stood open. Light spilled across the wooden deck. Victor Bennett stood inside with his arms crossed. Elliot, he said. I stepped into the room. Everything looked exactly the same as I had left it. The bed, the desk, the chair by the window. But it felt different now. Someone had been here, planning my death. Victor pointed toward the laptop on the desk. The camera caught everything he said. Volkov was inside 4 minutes before Torres grabbed him. We've got him on video trying to reach the deck. He paused. And we've got the master key Connor gave him. What about Connor? I asked. Torres is holding him at the security office. The sheriff's sending a boat in the morning, tomorrow. I sat on the edge of the bed, my legs suddenly weak. It was finished, at least this part of it. You handled tonight well, Victor said. Stayed calm, played your role perfectly. Between the video and Marcus Reed's report, we've got enough to tie Volkov and Flynn to Sophia and Logan. What happens now? Now the law takes over, Victor said. Statements, evidence, arrest warrants. By tomorrow, Logan and Sophia will be in custody. I nodded slowly. How are you holding up? Victor asked. I looked around the villa, the place where I had barely slept, where I had watched the neighboring deck, where I had wondered if I would survive the week. I don't know, I said honestly. Ask me tomorrow. Victor nodded. Fair enough. Get some rest. I'll be nearby if you need anything. He left quietly. I walked to the window and stared out at the ocean. Down on the beach, the bonfire still burned. The music still played. Guests still laughed in the warm island air. They had no idea what had happened tonight. I took out my phone and opened Sophia's recorded call. Her voice filled the room again. Love you, Dad. I closed my eyes. Tomorrow the sheriff would arrive. Tomorrow the arrests would begin. Tomorrow I would face Logan, but tonight, I was still here, still breathing, still alive. And for now, that was enough. I felt the vibration in my pocket before my mind fully caught up with what it meant. For a moment, I simply stood there beside the bonfire, the glow of the flames reflecting off the screen of my phone as I pulled it out. A single word from Victor stared back at me. Now. I didn't hesitate. I set my drink on the nearest table and turned away from the fire without another glance. My feet moved automatically, carrying me up the narrow path toward Villa 47. Behind me, the music from the steel drums continued. Laughter drifted through the warm air. Someone cheered as the band started a faster rhythm. The sounds faded quickly as I climbed the hill. Soon all I could hear was my own breathing, the crunch of gravel under my shoes, and the distant rhythm of waves crashing against the cliffs. My heart was pounding so violently it felt like it might burst from my chest before I even reached the door. When the villa came into view, I slowed. The front door was slightly open. Light spilled across the wooden deck and onto the path. I reached the doorway and placed one hand against the frame to steady myself. Then I stepped inside and saw him. Andrei Volkov stood in the center of my room with his back to me. His shoulders were tense, his posture rigid. In his right hand, he held a small glass vial filled with clear liquid. In his left hand was a syringe, a sedative. Victor had explained the plan earlier. They would drug me first, make sure I couldn't fight back, then carry me to the deck and stage a fall over the cliff. But Andrei wasn't moving toward the door to the deck. He wasn't moving at all. He was staring at the nightstand, at the photograph sitting there. It was the one I had brought from home, a small frame picture of Logan and me from years ago. Logan couldn't have been older than 10. He was holding a baseball mitt, grinning widely. My arm was draped across his shoulders. We both looked happy. Andrei stared at the picture like it was something fragile. I must have made a sound when I stepped forward because he turned suddenly. Our eyes met. For a long second, neither of us moved. His gaze shifted from my face to the vial in his hand, then back to the photo on the nightstand. He began, his voice rough, but the sentence never finished. The door behind me exploded open. Sam Torres stormed into the room with 2 security guards close behind him. Torres moved with practiced speed, grabbing Andrei's wrist and twisting it sharply. The vial slipped from Andrei's fingers and shattered against the floor. One guard kicked the broken glass aside, while the other grabbed Andrei's arms and forced them behind his back. Plastic zip ties snapped tight around his wrists. Andrei didn't fight. He didn't even struggle. He simply stood there, breathing heavily, his head bowed. Torres lifted his radio. "Clear," he said calmly. Then he turned to me. "You all right, Mr. Grayson?" I nodded slowly, though. I wasn't entirely sure it was true. My hands were shaking and my knees felt unsteady. Torres stepped in front of Andrei. "Andrei Volkov," he said firmly, "you're under arrest for attempted harm, unlawful entry, and conspiracy. You have the right to remain silent." "I know," Andrei interrupted quietly. "I know my rights." Torres finished the warning anyway before nodding to the guards. "Take him to the security office." They began guiding Andrei toward the door, but he stopped suddenly and turned his head to look at me. His face looked drained of color. His eyes were rimmed red. "I'm sorry," he said. "I didn't want to do this." I stared at him. "Then why did you?" I asked. Andrei hesitated. For a moment it looked like he might speak again. Instead, he lowered his gaze. "I needed the money." One of the guards pulled his arm, and Andrei allowed himself to be led outside. The door closed behind them. The room suddenly felt quiet. Torres crouched down and carefully picked up the vial from the floor using a pair of gloves. "Sedative," he said, after examining it. "Enough to knock someone unconscious for hours." He placed it inside a small evidence bag. "He was planning to use this on you," Torres continued, "then stage a fall from the deck. They'd say you'd had too much to drink and got too close to the edge." My legs gave out and I lowered myself onto the edge of the bed. Torres pulled out his phone. "We took Volkov's phone when we secured him," he said. "You might want to see this." He handed the device to me. The screen was already open to a text conversation. The contact was just a phone number, but I recognized it instantly. Logan's number. My fingers felt numb as I scrolled through the messages. May 18th, job confirmed. Serenity Island Resort. Target Elliot Grayson, 67, arrival, May 22nd. Villa 47, May 20th. Payment terms $80,000, half up front, half after completion. Bitcoin, May 21st, $40,000. Received, confirmed. May 23rd, target at bonfire tonight. Villa empty 8 p.m. to 11 p.m. Window is open. Then the final message, sent less than an hour earlier. May 23rd, 9:47 p.m. $80,000 wired. Make it look like an accident. No mistakes. My hands trembled as I stared at the screen. Logan had written those words. My son. He had typed them, pressed send, and continued his evening as if nothing had happened, waiting for confirmation that I was dead. Mr. Grayson Torres's voice pulled me back. "You okay?" I handed him the phone. "That number?" I said quietly. "That's my son." Torres nodded slowly. "I thought so. Victor filled me in earlier. Marcus Reed is sending over financial records tonight. Your son's debts, the forged loan, documents, everything." He slipped the phone into an evidence bag. "Between those records and these messages, we've got enough to arrest him." "What about Sophia?" I asked. Torres sighed. "She's involved too. Reed traced 17 calls between her and Connor Flynn. And we discovered something else. What Sophia Grayson isn't her real name, he said. Her birth name is Jennifer Walsh. She was investigated 8 years ago in connection with her first husband's death." Brian Walsh Torres looked surprised. "You already know I just found out today." He nodded. "That case is being reopened?" I closed my eyes for a moment. Jennifer Walsh, Brian Walsh, $200,000, and now me. Torres spoke gently. "Mr. Grayson, I need to ask you something important." I looked at him. "Do you want to press charges against who?" I asked quietly. "Everyone involved," he said. "Volkov, Flynn, your son, your daughter-in-law." He paused. "This was a coordinated plan to harm you." I looked toward the photograph on the nightstand. The boy in the picture smiled back at me, a version of Logan that no longer existed. "Yes," I said. "Press charges." Torres nodded. "Good. The sheriff will arrive in the morning to take statements and collect evidence." He walked toward the door, then paused. "For what it's worth, Mr. Grayson, you handled this the right way. A lot of people wouldn't have had the courage. I didn't feel courageous. I felt empty." After Torres left, the villa became silent again. I walked to the nightstand and picked up the photograph. Logan's young face stared up at me, frozen in time. I remembered Andre standing there earlier, staring at the same image. Remembered the hesitation in his voice. I didn't want to do this. Why had he stopped? Why had he looked at the picture so long? I set the frame back down and moved toward the window. Outside, the bonfire still burned. Music drifted faintly through the warm night air. I opened my phone and typed a message to Victor. "Andre's in custody. Torres has his phone." I saw the messages. Victor replied almost immediately. "Good. Try to get some sleep. Tomorrow will be long." I set the phone aside and sat in the chair by the window, staring out at the dark ocean. Tomorrow, the sheriff would arrive. Tomorrow, arrests would begin. Tomorrow, I would have to face Logan. But tonight, I was still here. Andrei Volkov sat in a locked room somewhere on this island. And for the first time in days, the waiting was over. The resort's security office was small and stark, nothing like the polished luxury outside. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting a cold, unforgiving glow over the room. There were no windows, just pale walls, a metal desk at the center, and 4 plain chairs arranged around it. Andrei Volkov sat alone on one side of the desk. His wrists were still bound with zip ties. His head was lowered, his shoulders slumped forward as he stared at his hands like they belonged to someone else. Victor and I sat across from him. Sam Torres stood by the door with his arms folded, silent but watchful. For nearly a minute no one spoke. The quiet felt heavy, pressing in on all of us. Finally, Andre lifted his head. His eyes were bloodshot, his face drawn and pale. The hard edge I'd expected from a man like him was gone. In its place was something else, entirely exhaustion. Regret. "I'll tell you everything," he said quietly. His voice sounded worn down, like someone who had run out of strength to pretend. "I'm done lying." Victor leaned forward slightly. "Then start from the beginning," he said. "Who hired you?" Andre didn't hesitate. "Logan Grayson," he said. The name hung in the air. "Your son." He glanced at me briefly before lowering his eyes again. "He contacted me about 3 weeks ago," Andre continued, "through an encrypted messaging app. Said he had a job. Said it paid $80,000. Bitcoin, Victor asked. Andre nodded slowly. 40,000 up front, 40,000 after the job was finished. "And you accepted," Victor said. "Yes." Andre swallowed hard, his voice tightening. "I accepted." Why, I asked. The word came out Grayson than I intended. Andre closed his eyes, his jaw tightening as if he were bracing for something painful. Then he reached slowly into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He unlocked it and opened a photo. Without saying a word, he turned the screen toward me. The image showed a little girl. She couldn't have been more than 7 years old. Her dark hair was tied into 2 uneven pigtails, and she was holding a stuffed rabbit that looked nearly as big as her. Her smile showed a gap where a front tooth was missing. "She's my daughter," Andre said quietly. "Her name is Emma." The name settled into the room. "She's 7 years old," he continued. "And she has leukemia." The word struck me like a physical blow. Andre's fingers tightened around the phone. "The treatment she needs isn't covered by insurance," he said. "It's experimental. A clinical trial in Germany. It's the only place offering the procedure that could save her." He paused, swallowing hard. "The cost is $80,000, exactly the amount Logan had promised him. I've tried everything," Andre continued. "Loans, fundraisers, selling my car, selling my house, everything I had." He looked down at the photo again, but it still wasn't enough. His voice dropped to a whisper. "And Emma doesn't have much time left." I stared at the little girl's picture, at the way she smiled without any idea what the world had planned for her. "So, when your son offered me $80,000, Andre said quietly, I said yes." No one spoke. The room fell into a heavy silence. Victor broke it. "Show us the messages." Andre handed him the phone. Victor scrolled through the encrypted conversation while I leaned forward to read over his shoulder. The messages were cold, precise. Logan had sent maps of the resort, instructions about the villa, my arrival date, my schedule. Everything had been carefully planned. Then we reached the final message. May 23rd, 9:47 p.m. target at bonfire until 11 p.m. Villa empty. Use sedative. Make it look like a fall. Heart condition will make it believable. $80,000 wired upon confirmation. I felt my stomach turn. "What exactly was the plan?" Victor asked. Andre rubbed his wrists against the plastic ties. "I was supposed to wait until you went to the bonfire," he said. "Connor Flynn gave me a master key to your villa." He nodded toward me. "I'd enter while you were gone. When you came back, I'd inject you with the sedative." He glanced at Torres. "Enough to knock you out for hours." Then he looked down at the floor. "After that, I was supposed to carry you onto the deck." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. "And the heart condition?" I asked quietly. Andre nodded. "Your son told me you take medication. Said if anyone questioned the fall, they'd assume it was related to your heart, that maybe you got dizzy." He paused. "That the fall was just bad luck." Bad luck. The words felt like poison. "But you didn't do it," Victor said. Andre shook his head slowly. "No." "Why not?" Andre lifted his eyes and looked directly at me. "Because of the photograph." He nodded toward me. "The one on your nightstand. You and your son." I felt a strange chill move through me. "He looked so happy in that picture," Andre said quietly. "You both did." His voice began to tremble, and all I could think about was Emma. He looked down at the photo on his phone. The way she looks at me, the way she trusts me. A tear rolled down his cheek. "I couldn't do it," he whispered. "I couldn't let her grow up knowing her father killed someone for money." He inhaled shakily. So I just stood there, holding the vial, staring at that picture. His shoulders sagged, and I couldn't move. Victor studied him carefully. "Andre, listen carefully," he said. "Did Logan mention anyone else?" "A backup plan." Andre hesitated. Victor leaned closer. "If there's another person involved, we need to know." Andre nodded slowly. "Sophia," he said. "My daughter-in-law?" I asked. Andre nodded. "She called me 2 days ago," he said. "Told me if I couldn't finish the job, there was someone else ready." A cold sensation spread through my chest. "What kind of backup?" Victor asked. "She didn't say much," Andre replied, "just that she had someone local on standby." "Local, someone who works at the resort." Torres straightened slightly. "What department?" Andre frowned. "I think maintenance." Victor and I exchanged a look. "Did she give you a name?" Torres asked. Andre shook his head. "No, she just said he was her insurance." Victor immediately pulled out his phone and began typing a message. "We need to identify him," he said. "Fast." I pulled out my own phone and called Marcus Reed. He answered on the first ring. "Elliot, what happened?" "We've got Volkov in custody," I said. "But Sophia mentioned a backup, someone local, possibly a maintenance worker." Marcus responded instantly. "Give me 10 minutes. I'll cross-reference Sophia's call records with the resort employee list." "Thanks." I ended the call. Across the table, Andre stared again at Emma's photograph. Tears ran down his face. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I'm so sorry." I studied him for a long moment. Then a question came to mind. What happens to Emma if you go to prison? Andre blinked in surprise. What your daughter, I said. If you're locked up, who takes care of her? Andre's face crumpled. There's no one, he whispered. Her mother left 3 years ago. His voice broke. She'll end up in foster care. The image of that little girl flashed through my mind again. 7 years old, fighting leukemia, and about to lose the only parent she had left. Victor, I said slowly, what if we made a deal? Victor raised an eyebrow. What kind of deal? Andre cooperates fully, I said. He testifies against Logan, Sophia, and Flynn. Gives investigators everything. I hesitated for a moment. And I pay for Emma's treatment. Andre's head snapped up. What, the $80,000? I said. I'll cover it. Andre stared at me in disbelief. Why, he whispered. Why would you do that? I looked at the picture on his phone. Because she's 7 years old, I said quietly. And none of this was her choice. Andre broke down completely. Torres stepped forward. If you cooperate, he told Andre, I'll recommend leniency to the sheriff. Instead of 20 years, you could be looking at 8. Andre nodded through tears. Victor glanced at me. You're a better man than most, Elliot. I didn't feel like one. My phone buzzed in my hand. Marcus Reed, I answered. Marcus. I found the backup, he said. My pulse quickened. Who is it, Troy Dawson? Marcus replied. Maintenance worker at Serenity Island Resort. I looked at Victor. Sophia called him twice this week, Marcus continued. Last call was this morning. Victor's jaw tightened. Then we know who we're looking for. He stood up, and we need to find him. Now. Morning arrived quietly over Serenity Island. Pale sunlight slipped through the curtains of Villa 47, and the distant cries of gulls drifted in from the shoreline. For a few peaceful seconds, my mind floated in that half-awake haze where nothing makes sense yet. Then reality rushed back all at once. Andrei Volkov, the vial of sedative, the photograph on the nightstand, the confession, and the name that still echoed in my head, Troy Dawson. I reached for my phone on the bedside table. The screen lit up. 8:07 a.m. Right as I was about to stand, the phone began ringing. Marcus Reed. I answered immediately. Marcus? Elliot, he said. Good news. We got him. Relief washed through me so suddenly that I had to sit down again. Troy Dawson, I asked. Yeah, Marcus confirmed. Torres and the security team picked him up about an hour ago. What happened? He tried to approach your villa around 6 this morning, came up the service path behind Villa 47, carrying a maintenance toolkit. Marcus paused. Inside the bag, we found lockpicks. I exhaled slowly. Where is he now? In the same security office where Volkov is being held, Marcus said. He hasn't said much yet, but we don't really need him to talk. I stood and began pacing the room. Why's that? Because we found the money trail? Marcus replied. Troy Dawson has been on Sophia's payroll. My stomach tightened. How much 2-wire transfers? Marcus said. $20,000 each, both sent within the last 7 days. $40,000. Exactly half of what Logan had promised Andre. Sophia had hired a second man for half the price. What do we know about Dawson? I asked. 42 years old, Marcus replied. Maintenance worker at Serenity Island Resort for 3 years. No criminal history until now. He paused again. But here's the interesting part. Dawson didn't know about Andre. What do you mean Sophia kept them completely separate? Marcus said. She told Dawson he was the only one handling the job. I rubbed my forehead slowly. She was hedging her bets. Exactly, Marcus said. If Volkov failed, Dawson was the fallback, and neither one knew the other existed. I sank onto the edge of the bed, staring at the floor. Logan may have arranged the payment, but the strategy. The layered planning, the redundancy that had Sophia written all over it. She hadn't trusted a single hired man. She'd hired 2. Elliot, Marcus said. There's something else you should hear. I straightened slightly. What is it? I kept digging into Sophia's background, he continued. Or rather, Jennifer Walsh. The name sounded colder every time I heard it. She legally changed it 9 years ago, Marcus said. Right after her first husband died, Brian Walsh. Right. Marcus took a breath. He died during a boating trip on Lake Michigan. Sophia was the only other person on the boat. I felt the room grow still around me. She told the police he slipped and fell overboard, Marcus continued. Said the water was rough and she couldn't reach him in time, but that wasn't true, I said quietly. No, Marcus replied. The weather records show the lake was calm that night, My stomach twisted, and there's more he said. Sophia told investigators she threw a life preserver. But when police checked the boat, the storage locker containing the life ring had never been opened. I closed my eyes. She never even tried, I murmured. That's what the lead detective believed Marcus said. Who was that detective Richard Kowalski? Marcus continued speaking as I paced slowly across the room. Kowalski documented several inconsistencies in her story, but the biggest red flag came from the autopsy. What did they find? Bruising Marcus said, quietly. On Brian Walsh's shoulders and upper back. The meaning was obvious. Consistent with someone holding him underwater, Marcus added. My chest tightened. Kowalski wanted to push the investigation further, Marcus said, but the district attorney declined to pursue charges. Not enough evidence, I said. Exactly. Marcus sighed. 6 months later, Sophia collected a $200,000 life insurance payout. $200,000. The exact same pattern, the exact same motive. She moved to a new state shortly after Marcus continued, changed her name, built a completely new identity. I stopped pacing and stared out the window. She's done this before, I said quietly. That's what the evidence suggests, Marcus replied. Sophia Grace and Jennifer Walsh killed for money once and got away with it, which meant she believed she could do it again. And this time, I was the target. I pressed my hand against the window glass, looking out at the ocean. Does Logan know? I asked. About Brian Walsh, Marcus said. I doubt it. She buried that history deep. New name, new city, new life. He paused. Logan probably has no idea who he married. I thought about my son, the way he had looked at Sophia, the way he trusted her. Marcus was right. Logan had helped plan the crime, but he wasn't the mastermind. He was the puppet. The sheriff is already on his way to the island, Marcus continued. He should arrive around 10. What happens then? He'll collect statements, gather evidence, and file the arrest warrants, Marcus said. Between Volkov's confession, Dawson's payment, records, the text messages, and the financial documents we've uncovered, he let the sentence finish itself. We have everything we need. I swallowed slowly. Logan and Sophia will both be arrested today. How long are they looking at? I asked. Marcus didn't hesitate. Logan 15 to 20 years for conspiracy and attempted murder, and Sophia. With the reopened Walsh case, Marcus said quietly, 25 to life, 25 years, maybe more. I should have felt satisfaction hearing that. Instead, I felt tired. Thank you, Marcus, I said, for everything. You did the hard part, Elliot, he replied. You saw it through. After the call ended, I remained seated for a long moment. 2 hired men, Andrei Volkov, Troy Dawson, both desperate enough to consider ending my life. And behind them stood Sophia, careful, patient, methodical. A woman who had already taken one life years earlier, and nearly taken mine. I stood and walked toward the window again. The ocean stretched out endlessly under the bright morning sky. Gentle waves rolled toward the shore, peaceful, beautiful, deceptive. A knock sounded at the door. I opened it. Victor stood there holding 2 cups of coffee. You heard he asked. Marcus called. Victor nodded. The sheriff's boat should arrive in about 2 hours. Once he gets here, we hand everything over. And by noon, I asked, Logan and Sophia will be in custody. I accepted the coffee. Victor studied my face carefully. How are you holding up? I don't know, I said honestly. Ask me after today. Victor gave a small nod. Drink this, he said. You're going to need it. I took a sip. Victor, I said quietly, thank you. For what? For saving my life. He shook his head. You saved yourself, Elliot, he said. I just helped. Victor turned and walked away down the path. I stood there for a moment before closing the door again. Jennifer Walsh. That was her real name, not Sophia Grayson, not my daughter-in-law. A woman who had already gotten away with murder once before. I pulled out my phone and opened the last text message Logan had sent me. Just boarded the ferry. Thank you again, son. Can't wait. I stared at it for a long time. Then I typed my reply. The sheriff is coming. It's over. You and Sophia are going to prison. Don't ever contact me again. I pressed send. Then I blocked his number. I walked back to the window and looked out across the endless water. Somewhere years ago, Brian Walsh had disappeared beneath the surface of Lake Michigan. His family had never known the truth, and I couldn't stop wondering how many other lives had Jennifer Walsh destroyed before anyone finally stopped her. The ocean offered no answers. It simply rolled onward, vast and indifferent, just as it always had. By 10 o'clock that morning, Serenity Island no longer felt like a vacation paradise. The relaxed atmosphere had been replaced by quiet tension. Guests walked slower, whispering among themselves, sensing something serious had happened, even if they didn't know the details. I stood at the end of the dock watching the horizon. A white Coast Guard boat cut through the calm water, heading straight for the island. At the bow stood a tall man in uniform, Sheriff Douglas Miller. The boat eased alongside the pier. A deckhand secured the ropes, and Sheriff Miller stepped onto the dock. He looked to be in his late 40s, tall, broad-shouldered, with the weathered face of someone used to dealing with difficult situations. A khaki uniform stretched across his frame, a polished badge pinned over his chest. Sam Torres was already waiting. They shook hands, and Torres quickly began explaining the situation. As he spoke, Miller's expression hardened. Victor and I walked down the dock to meet them. Miller turned toward me, studying my face carefully before extending his hand. "Mr. Grayson," he said. "Sheriff Douglas Miller. I hear you've had quite a week." I shook his hand. "That's one way to describe it." Sam gave me the overview. Miller said, "2 hired men in custody. Your son and daughter-in-law behind it, and a resort manager who helped coordinate." "That's right." He nodded once. "Let's talk somewhere private." We moved into the resort's small conference room. Torres closed the door behind us. Victor sat beside me, while Sheriff Miller took the chair across the table. Miller placed a digital recorder on the table and pressed record. "This is Sheriff Douglas Miller," he said. "Saturday, May 24th, 10:15 a.m., interview with Elliot Grayson." He looked directly at me. "Mr. Grayson, start from the beginning." So I did. I told him about the phone call I'd overheard weeks earlier, about Logan's suspicious behavior, and the one-way ferry ticket that stranded me on the island. I explained how Victor Bennett came into the picture, how Marcus Reed began digging into Logan's finances, and how we discovered the hired man, Andrei Volkov. $80,000 to make my death look like an accident. I described the plan: sedate me, carry me to the deck, and push me over the edge. Then I told him about the backup plan Sophia had arranged. Another man, Troy Dawson, a maintenance worker at the resort, waiting in case Andre failed. Finally, I explained Sophia's real identity, Jennifer Walsh, and the suspicious drowning of her first husband, Brian Walsh, 9 years earlier. Sheriff Miller listened without interrupting. When I finished, he leaned back slowly. "That's quite a story," he said. "And if the evidence holds up, your son and daughter-in-law are facing serious charges." "It holds up," Victor said firmly. "We have recordings, confessions, financial records, and surveillance footage." Torres slid a thick folder across the table. "Everything we've gathered," he said. Miller began flipping through the documents. His expression grew darker with every page. At that moment, my phone buzzed. Marcus Reed. "Excuse me," I said. I stepped into the hallway and answered. "Marcus, I finished the financial report," he said. "Go ahead." I placed the call on speaker so Miller could hear. "Logan Grayson owes $285,000 in gambling debts," Marcus began. "High-interest lenders. He's been barely keeping up with payments." Miller wrote something down. "And Sophia?" he asked. $95,000 in credit card debt," Marcus said. 7 cards, all maxed out, 2 months overdue, so they were desperate," Miller said. "Yes, but it gets worse," Marcus continued. My stomach tightened. 3 months ago, someone attempted to take out a $450,000 home equity loan using Elliot Grayson's identity. "Was the loan approved?" Miller asked. "No, the bank flagged it, but $35,000 had already been withdrawn." My jaw clenched. "Logan had already stolen from me." "Can you prove he forged the signature?" Miller asked. "Yes. Handwriting analysis shows it closely matches Logan's writing. Send that evidence immediately," Miller said. "There's another witness," Marcus added. "Kevin Morrison. Logan convinced him to invest $180,000 in a fake real estate deal. Morrison lost everything and is willing to testify," Good Miller said. "Have him come in." The call ended. Sheriff Miller returned to the file and pulled out a photo of Connor Flynn. "Resort manager," he said. "How's he involved?" Torres answered. "He provided the master key to Elliot Grayson's villa and gave Andrei Volkov the victim's schedule. We also have 17 phone calls between Flynn and Sophia Grayson. Motivation?" Miller asked. "Debt," I said quietly. "Logan loaned Flynn $50,000 2 years ago. Flynn couldn't repay it. Miller shook his head. There's always a choice, he said. He chose wrong. He closed the folder. Based on the evidence, I'm issuing arrest warrants for Logan Grayson and Sophia Grayson. My chest tightened. Charges include conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder, and fraud. We will also reopen the investigation into Brian Walsh's death. What kind of sentences are we talking about? I asked. Logan could face 15 to 20 years, Miller said. And Sophia, if we can prove involvement in the Walsh case, she could face 25 years to life. He stood. I'll need you to come back to the mainland to give a formal statement. Then we execute the warrants. He looked at me. You deserve to see it through. I glanced at Victor. He nodded. All right, I said quietly. Let's finish it. We walked back to the dock where a private boat waited. Captain William Foster stood at the helm. Mr. Grayson, he said, ready to head home. Yes, I said. I'm ready. The boat pulled away from the island. I stood at the stern, watching Serenity Island shrink behind us, the white villas, the palm trees, the beach, where I had arrived believing my son had given me a gift. Now, I knew the truth. It hadn't been a gift. It had been a trap. Victor stepped beside me. How are you feeling? I'm not sure yet, I said honestly. He nodded. It's almost over. Ahead of us, the mainland slowly grew closer. Somewhere in that city, Logan and Sophia were still living their normal lives. They didn't know the plan had failed, didn't know the evidence was already in the sheriff's hands. They believed they had won, but they were wrong. I took out my phone and reread the final message I had sent Logan. The sheriff is coming. It's over. Don't contact me again. He hadn't replied, and he never would. The boat engine hummed as wind and salt spray hit my face. Tonight I would face my son one last time, and after that I would walk away, for good. Before I reveal what really happened at that house, type 1 in the comments, so I know you're still here with me. Seeing those comments lets me know this story still has your attention. And just a quick note before we continue, the next part includes a few dramatized elements added for storytelling purposes. If that's not something you enjoy, feel free to step away now and choose a different story that suits you better. The drive took 40 minutes, though. It felt much longer. Victor sat beside me in silence, his gaze fixed on the road ahead. Behind us, Sheriff Miller's patrol car followed steadily, 2 deputies inside. Occasionally, the police radio crackled with static, but otherwise the car was quiet except for the steady hum of the engine. I stared out the window. The city slid past in familiar pieces, gas stations, grocery stores, traffic lights I had driven through hundreds of times. Everything looked exactly the way it had a week ago, but nothing felt the same. A week earlier, I had been a father, taking a trip his son had given him. Now, I was returning with the sheriff to arrest him. When we turned onto Oakwood Drive, my chest tightened. The street was quiet, lined with tidy houses and trimmed lawns. At the end of the cul-de-sac stood number 112 Logan's home. 2 stories of white, siding a small porch and a driveway, where Logan's sedan was parked beneath the porch light. The house lights were on. They were home. Victor pulled the car over 2 houses down. The patrol car rolled in behind us and shut off its lights. Sheriff Miller stepped out and walked toward my window. He leaned down slightly. We'll wait here, he said in a low voice. You walk up and knock. When you give the signal, we move in. I swallowed. You ready? I nodded, though I wasn't sure I was. I stepped out of the car. The air was cool, the evening sky fading toward purple. My legs felt heavy as I walked down the sidewalk toward the house. Each step seemed slower than the last. By the time I reached the porch, my hands were trembling. I stood there for a moment, staring at the door. I had walked through that door more times than I could count birthday parties, Sunday dinners, Christmas mornings. It felt like another lifetime. Finally, I raised my hand and knocked. Footsteps moved inside the house. The lock clicked. The door opened. Logan stood there holding a large duffel bag. For a moment, he simply stared at me. The color drained from his face. Dad, he whispered, his voice cracking. You're here. I didn't answer. I stepped forward into the house. Logan instinctively stepped aside, letting me pass. The living room was chaos. Suitcases lay open on the floor. Clothes were scattered everywhere. Drawers had been pulled out and emptied. On the coffee table sat stacks of crisp $100 bills held together by rubber bands. $28,000. Beside the money were 2 plane tickets. I didn't need to read them closely to know the destination. Sophia appeared in the doorway to the kitchen. Elliot, she said, forcing a calm smile. We weren't expecting you. I looked at her. then at Logan, then back at the cash on the table. I know everything, I said quietly. The room fell silent. Logan slowly set the duffel bag on the floor. Dad, I don't know what you think you know, but I know about Andrei Volkov, I said. Logan froze. I know about Troy Dawson, I continued. I know about the $80,000, the $40,000 deposit, the one-way ferry ticket. Sophia's smile vanished. The master key Connor Flynn gave them, I added. The plan to make my death look like an accident. Logan opened his mouth, but no words came out. Sophia suddenly stepped forward. Elliot, listen to me, she said quickly. This isn't what it looks like. I gestured toward the suitcases. Really? Because it looks like you're packing to run. It looks like $28,000 in cash and 2 plane tickets to Mexico. Logan stared at the floor. Sophia's voice sharpened. It was him, she said, suddenly pointing at Logan. It was all him. I didn't know anything about this. He told me we were going on vacation. Her voice trembled. I swear, Elliot, I had no idea. For a moment, I almost believed her. She was good, convincing. But I knew better. I pulled out my phone and opened the recording. Then I pressed play. Sophia's voice filled the room. Dad, how are you? How's the island silence? Then the next part of the recording. What are your plans for tonight? A bonfire. How lovely. What time does it start? And you'll be there the whole evening. The recording ended. Sophia's face drained of color. That was Friday night, I said quietly. You called me to confirm I'd be at the bonfire so Andrei Volkov could enter my villa. Sophia said nothing. You coordinated everything, I continued. You hired Troy Dawson as a backup. You contacted Connor Flynn. You made sure the plan worked. No, she whispered weakly. I know who you really are, I said. Her head jerked up. Jennifer Walsh. Her eyes widened. I know about Brian Walsh, I said calmly. About Lake Michigan. About the $200,000 in life insurance. Sophia stumbled back a step. The police are reopening that case, I said. And when they do, they'll find out what really happened to your first husband. Sophia's lips trembled. For the first time, she looked afraid. I turned to Logan. He was staring at the floor, shoulders shaking. Dad, he whispered. I didn't want to do this. I waited. I was desperate, he said. The debts. The loans. I couldn't see another way out. You could have asked me for help. His head snapped up. I was ashamed, he said. I didn't want you to know how badly I'd failed. So instead I said quietly, you decided to end my life. Logan broke down. I didn't know what else to do. You could have asked your father. He said nothing. I looked at him, the man standing in front of me, and something inside my chest shattered. Don't ever call me Dad again, I said. Logan's face collapsed. Please, he sobbed. Please, I'm sorry. Before he could say more, the front door burst open. Sheriff Miller and 2 deputies stepped inside. Logan Grayson, Sophia Grayson Miller, said firmly. You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder, and fraud. Logan turned toward me in panic. Dad, please, he cried. Don't do this. I'm your son. I didn't move. One deputy grabbed Logan's arms and pulled them behind his back. Handcuffs clicked shut. The second deputy cuffed Sophia. Sheriff Miller picked up the stacks of cash from the table. $28,000, he said. Then he lifted the plane tickets and 2 tickets to Mexico. Logan's voice cracked. It's not what it looks like. Save it for the judge, Miller said. He nodded to the deputies. Take them. They led Logan and Sophia toward the door. Logan kept turning back toward me. Dad, he cried. Please, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I stood there silent. Sophia never looked back. The front door closed, and suddenly the house felt empty. Victor stepped beside me. I walked to the window. Outside, the deputies were putting Logan and Sophia into the patrol car. Logan was still crying. Sophia sat beside him, staring straight ahead. The car doors slammed shut. The engine started. Moments later, the patrol car drove away. Victor spoke quietly. You okay? I didn't answer. I stepped out onto the porch. The driveway was empty now. The evening air was cool. The sky above the neighborhood glowed purple and orange as the sun sank below the horizon. I sat down slowly on the porch steps and rested my head in my hands. The weight of it all finally settled in. The betrayal, the anger, the grief. Victor sat beside me without saying anything. For a long time we watched the sky darken. Finally he spoke. He's your son, Victor said quietly. That doesn't disappear. I know. My voice sounded rough. But he's not the boy I raised. I looked out at the empty street. That boy's gone. Victor didn't argue. Behind us, the house was silent. Ahead of me stretched a future I hadn't imagined, uncertain, lonely, but still mine. I had survived, but somewhere along the way, I had lost my son, and I still didn't know which pain was worse. The hotel room was quiet, too quiet. The kind of silence that pressed down on you, made you aware of every breath, every heartbeat. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the folder on the nightstand. Marcus Reed had compiled everything into a single file. Texts, wire transfers, bank statements, recorded phone calls. The evidence that would put Logan and Sophia behind bars for decades. I picked it up, flipped through the pages. Logan's messages to Andre, Sophia's calls to Connor Flynn. The forged loan application with my signature, all of it laid out in black and white. This was my son's life now, reduced to evidence. I closed the folder and set it back down. Then I opened the nightstand drawer and pulled out a piece of paper, folded in half, worn at the edges. I'd written it Thursday night alone in Villa 47, after I'd first seen Andrei Volkov watching my villa. A letter, in case I didn't make it. I unfolded it slowly and started to read. To whoever finds this, my name is Elliot Grayson. I'm 67 years old. If you're reading this, it means I didn't survive my trip to Serenity Island. I want you to know that I came here knowing what was going to happen. I overheard my son Logan Grayson planning to have me killed. He hired someone to stage an accident. He did it for money. $800,000. I could have gone to the police, but I didn't. Because I needed proof. So I came to this island knowing there was a hired killer waiting for me. And I gathered evidence. If I'm gone, it means I failed. But I need you to know this. I forgive him. Logan is my son. I raised him. I worked 2 jobs to give him a future. And somewhere along the way, he stopped being that boy. He became someone I don't recognize. But he's still my son. So I forgive him. Not because he deserves it, but because I can't carry that anger with me wherever I'm going. If there's money left, I want it to go to Logan's children if he has any. Not to him, not to Sophia, but to his children, because they didn't ask for any of this. And if there are no children, give it to someone who needs it. Someone like Emma Volkov, the 7-year-old girl whose father was hired to kill me. She has leukemia. She needs $80,000 for treatment. I've already arranged to pay it, but if something happens to me, make sure she gets it. She's innocent. Howard Brennan, my lawyer, will handle my estate. He's a good man. Trust him. Thank you for making sure the truth comes out. For making sure Logan faces what he's done. Elliot Grayson. I folded the letter back up, my hands shaking. I'd written it thinking I might not make it off that island. But I had made it. I was still here. And Logan was the one who was gone. I set the letter down and pressed my palms against my eyes, trying to hold back the tears. But I couldn't. They came anyway, hot and stinging, and I let them fall. I cried for the boy Logan used to be, for the man I'd hoped he'd become, for the years I'd spent believing that love and sacrifice were enough. They weren't. My phone buzzed. Howard, I answered. Hey, Jan Elliot, how are you holding up? I didn't know how to answer that, so I didn't. I know today was hard, Howard said gently. Seeing him, hearing him beg, walking away. Yeah, I said, my voice rough. It was. You did the right thing. Did I? Because it doesn't feel right. It feels like I just destroyed my own son. He destroyed himself, Howard said. You just refused to go down with him. I closed my eyes. I keep thinking about that letter, about how I forgave him. And now, I don't know if I meant it. You meant it, Howard said. You wrote it when you thought you were going to lose everything. That's when people tell the truth. And the truth is, you love him, even after everything. I don't know if love is enough anymore. It's not, Howard said quietly, but it's something, and someday maybe that'll matter. We talked for a few more minutes. Howard told me the arraignment was scheduled for Monday morning, that Logan and Sophia would both be held without bail. I thanked him and hung up. I stood and walked to the window, looking out at the city. Somewhere out there, Logan was sitting in a cell, alone, scared. And somewhere else, Sophia was doing the same. Except she wasn't scared. She was calculating. But it didn't matter, because the truth was out. The evidence was solid, and they were both going to pay. I thought about the question I'd asked myself earlier. What's left? My son was gone. My family was shattered. But I was alive. And that had to mean something. I pulled out my phone and started typing. Things to do. 1. Sell the house. Too many memories. 2. Find a smaller place, somewhere quiet. 3. Call Emma Volkov's doctors. Make sure the payment goes through. 4. Volunteer somewhere. Library, shelter. Somewhere I can help. 5. Learn something new. Dancing maybe, or painting. 6. Live. I stared at that last word for a long time. Live. Not survive, not endure. Live. For 67 years, I'd lived for other people. For Logan. For his future. But it hadn't worked out. And now, for the first time in my life, I had to figure out how to live for myself. I didn't know if I could do it, but I had to try. I turned off the lights and lay back on the bed. Tomorrow I'd start over. Tomorrow I'd figure out what came next. But tonight I let myself feel it. All of it. The grief, the loss, the relief, the guilt, and underneath it all, something else. Hope. Small, fragile, but there. I closed my eyes and whispered to the empty room. I'm going to live. Not for Logan, not for anyone else. For me. And for the first time in a week, I believed it. 3 months later, I walked into the Riverside District Courthouse. The November sky hung gray and heavy, matching the weight in my chest. Howard Brennan met me at the entrance, his hand firm on my shoulder. You ready? He asked. I nodded, though I wasn't sure I'd ever be ready to watch my son answer for what he'd done. The courtroom was cold in clinical rows of wooden benches facing a raised judge's bench. I took my seat in the second row, Howard beside me. Across the aisle, Logan sat at the defense table in an orange jumpsuit, his hands cuffed in front of him. His lawyer, Robert Bennett, leaned close and whispered something. Logan didn't respond. He just stared at the table. Sophia sat at a separate defense table, her attorney Michelle Stone shuffling papers beside her. Sophia looked thinner, her face pale and drawn. She didn't look my way. At a third table sat Connor Flynn, Troy Dawson, and Andrei Volkov, each with their own counsel. Andrei's eyes found mine for a moment, and I saw something there, regret maybe, or shame. I looked away. All rise. Judge Margaret Haynes entered, a woman in her early 60s with steel gray hair and a no-nonsense expression. We stood then sat as she settled into her seat. This is the matter of the people versus Logan Grayson. Sophia. Grayson, also known as Jennifer Walsh, Connor Flynn, Troy Dawson, and Andrei Volkov. She announced. Counsel, are the parties ready? The prosecutor, Sarah Collins, stood. She was in her mid-40s, composed and confident. The people are ready, Your Honor. Each defense attorney affirmed their readiness. Judge Haynes gestured to Collins. You may proceed. Collins approached the jury. She spoke clearly, methodically, as she laid out the case. Ladies and gentlemen, this case is about greed, betrayal, and a plot to murder an innocent man, a father who trusted his family. Elliot Grayson, the victim, sits in this courtroom today only because he was smart enough and brave enough to uncover the scheme before it succeeded. She clicked a remote and the screen lit up with a text message. Transferred $80,000. Stage it as an accident. This, Collins said, was sent by defendant Logan Grayson to Andrei Volkov on May 23, 2025. Logan Grayson hired Mr. Volkov to kill his own father in exchange for $80,000 paid in Bitcoin. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. I felt Howard's hand on my arm. Collins played an audio recording, next the call from Sophia I'd recorded on the island. Her voice was smooth, almost sweet, as she asked about my medication and my plans. This woman coordinated every detail, Collins said, pointing to Sophia. She was the mastermind. She hired a second man, Troy Dawson, as insurance, paying him $40,000 to finish the job if the first attempt failed. Collins moved to the forged loan document projected on the screen. My signature sat at the bottom of a $450,000 home equity line. Logan had withdrawn $35,000 before I even knew it existed. Logan Grayson owed $285,000 in gambling debts. Collins continued. Sophia Grayson owed $95,000 on credit cards. Together, they stood to inherit $800,000 if Elliot Grayson died, $350,000 from life insurance, $450,000 from his home. She turned to the jury. But this wasn't Sophia's first time. 9 years ago, her husband Brian Walsh drowned under suspicious circumstances on Lake Michigan. She collected $200,000 in insurance money. The case was ruled accidental, but Detective Richard Kowalski of the Chicago Police Department had his doubts. He's here today to testify. Kowalski took the stand. He described the inconsistencies in Brian's case, the calm weather, the missing life vest, the bruising on Brian's shoulders that couldn't be explained. Kevin Morrison testified next, explaining how Logan had convinced him to invest $180,000 in a fake real estate venture. Kevin never saw the money again. "I trusted him," Kevin said, his voice breaking. "I thought he was my friend." Victor Bennett took the stand after that, describing the surveillance operation on Serenity Island. He walked the jury through the timeline, the camera installation the night Andre entered Villa 47, with a sedative and a plan to stage my fall. Sam Torres corroborated every detail. By the time Collins rested her case, the defense had little room to maneuver. Robert Bennett tried to argue that Logan had been manipulated by Sophia. Michelle Stone claimed Sophia had been framed. Judge Haynes was unmoved. "The jury will disregard speculation," she said more than once. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. When they returned, the foreman stood. "We find the defendant Logan Grayson guilty on all counts. We find the defendant Sophia Grayson, also known as Jennifer Walsh, guilty on all counts. Connor Flynn guilty, Troy Dawson guilty, Andre Volkov guilty." Judge Haynes set sentencing immediately. "Logan Grayson, you are sentenced to 20 years in state prison." Logan's head dropped. His shoulders shook. "Sophia Grayson, you are sentenced to 25 years. Sophia stared straight ahead, expressionless. "Connor Flynn, 5 years. Troy Dawson, 12 years. Andre Volkov, given your cooperation and personal circumstances, 8 years. Andre closed his eyes. I thought of his daughter Emma, 7 years old, and fighting for her life. I'd already arranged for the $80,000 to be sent to the hospital in Germany. As the bailiffs led the defendants out, Logan turned and looked at me. His eyes were red, his face streaked with tears. "Dad," he mouthed. I didn't look back. I stood, collected my coat, and walked out with Howard at my side. Outside, the November air was sharp and clean. I stood on the courthouse steps and looked up at the gray sky. My heart felt heavy, but somewhere beneath the weight was a flicker of relief. I was still here. I was still breathing. And somehow, I had to find a way to keep going. 1 year later, I stood in my new apartment in downtown Riverside, watching the spring sunlight spill through the window. The place was small, a 1-bedroom unit on the 3rd floor, but it was mine. No ghosts, no memories of Logan or Sophia. Just clean white walls and a view of the river. I'd sold the house on Maple Street 3 months after the trial. Howard had helped me sort through the paperwork. The house had been in my family for 30 years, but every room carried the weight of what had happened. I couldn't sleep there anymore. I couldn't sit at the kitchen table without remembering the phone call I'd overheard, the moment my life had fractured, so I let it go. The apartment was easier, simpler. I bought a used couch, a bookshelf, a small desk by the window. I kept a few framed photos, my parents, my late wife, a picture of Logan as a boy blowing out candles on his 8th birthday. I didn't throw that one away. I couldn't. He was still my son, even if I didn't recognize the man he'd become. Most mornings, I walked to the Riverside Community Center. I'd started volunteering there in January, teaching basic math to kids who struggled in school. At first, it was just something to fill the hours. But somewhere along the way, teaching became more than that. It reminded me why I'd chosen this profession for the moment. A kid's eyes lit up when they finally understood a problem. One of my students, a 9-year-old girl named Sophia, had been failing her multiplication tables. By March, she was solving 2-digit problems in her head. Her mother hugged me after class and said, "Thank you for not giving up on her." I told her I never would, and I meant it. Victor and I met for coffee most Wednesdays. He'd retired from private security in December. We'd become close over the past year. We went fishing every Saturday morning, driving out to Lake Harmon with sandwiches and coffee. His stories reminded me that survival wasn't just about getting through the hard times. It was about finding a way to live afterward. One Saturday in late March, Victor asked me if I'd heard from Logan. I shook my head. "He writes me letters. I don't read them." Victor nodded, didn't push. After a while, he said, "You did the right thing, Elliot. You know that, right?" I wasn't sure I did, but I appreciated him saying it. Howard handled the rest of my estate planning that spring. After selling the house and paying off the remaining debts, I had a little over $700,000. I set aside $200,000 for myself. The rest, $500,000, I put into a trust for Emma Volkov. Howard raised an eyebrow. "Andre's daughter, Elliot, you don't owe her anything." "I know," I said. "But she's 8 years old. She didn't ask for any of this. And her father made a mistake, but he was trying to save her life. I can't ignore that." The money would be held in trust until Emma turned 18. I wrote her a letter to include with the documents. "Dear Emma, my name is Elliot Grayson. You don't know me, but I knew your father. He made a mistake, a serious one, but he did it because he loved you more than anything in the world. I hope you never have to make the kind of choices he made. I hope you grow up healthy, happy, and surrounded by people who care about you. This money is for you. Use it wisely. Live a good life. Sincerely, Elliot. In February, I'd run into Nathan at a coffee shop, the dance instructor I'd met at the bonfire on Serenity Island. When he invited me to try a beginner's ballroom class, I surprised myself and said yes. The first lesson was awkward. I stepped on my partner's toes twice. But Nathan was patient, and by the third week I was getting the hang of it. The box step, the basic foxtrot, the slow rhythm of the tango. Dancing wasn't about perfection, Nathan told me. It was about being present, feeling the music, trusting your partner, letting go. By April, I was going twice a week. I even performed a short routine at the studio's spring showcase, a waltz to an old Frank Sinatra song. When the music ended and the small crowd applauded, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Pride, joy, freedom. One evening in late May, I stood on the dance floor after class alone. The studio was empty, the lights dim. I closed my eyes and took a slow, deliberate step forward, then another, and another. The music was only in my head, but it was enough. I wasn't running anymore. I wasn't hiding. I wasn't waiting for the next disaster to find me. I was living, finally truly living, and for the first time in a year, I believed I deserved it. The evening of the spring dance showcase, I stood backstage at the Riverside Community Arts Center, adjusting my tie. My hands were shaking not from fear, but from anticipation. Through the curtain gap, I could see the audience filing in, about 50 people. Victor sat in the third row, a small smile on his face. Howard was near the back reading the program. Nathan appeared beside me, clapping me on the shoulder. "You ready, Elliot?" I nodded, though I wasn't entirely sure. "You'll do great," Nathan said. "Just remember, it's not about the steps, it's about the feeling." Across the backstage area, Margaret was stretching. She caught my eye and gave me a reassuring nod. Margaret was 65, a widow who'd lost her husband 2 years ago. Dancing was her way of learning how to move again. We were dancing a waltz together tonight. The lights dimmed. Nathan welcomed the audience. Then the first pair took the stage. One by one, students performed. A young couple danced a tango. An older man performed a foxtrot. The crowd applauded after each piece. And then it was our turn. Elliot Grayson and Margaret Sullivan performing a Viennese waltz. Margaret and I walked onto the stage. The lights were bright, the audience a blur. My heart pounded, but I took Margaret's hand and we assumed our starting position. The music began a slow, sweeping melody. I counted the beats. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. We stepped forward together, moving in a gentle arc across the floor. At first, I was hyper-aware of every movement. But then somewhere in the middle, I stopped thinking. I let the music carry me. I felt Margaret's hand in mine, the rhythm of our steps, the way we moved as one. For those 3 minutes, nothing else existed. Not the audience, not the past, not the weight of everything I'd survived, just the dance. When the music ended, we held our final pose. Then the audience erupted into applause. Margaret squeezed my hand, her eyes shining. "We did it," she whispered. "We did," I said. After the showcase, there was a reception, coffee, cookies, congratulations. Victor shook my hand. Howard clapped me on the back. Nathan gave me a quick hug. But after a while, I needed air. I slipped out and walked down the street toward the beach. The sun was setting, casting the sky in shades of pink and orange. I took off my shoes and walked along the sand, feeling the cool grains beneath my feet. The waves rolled in gentle and rhythmic, and I stood at the water's edge watching the horizon. A year ago, I'd stood on a different beach, Serenity Island. I'd been sent there to vanish, to become another old man who'd had an accident. My own son had orchestrated it, but I hadn't let them. I'd fought, I'd planned, I'd survived. And standing here now, I realized something survival wasn't just about staying alive. It was about what you did afterward. It was about choosing to keep going even when the easiest thing would be to stop. I was 68 years old. I'd lost my son, not to an accident, not to illness, but to his own choices. He was alive sitting in a prison cell, but the boy I'd raised was gone. That loss would never stop hurting, but I couldn't carry that weight forever. I couldn't let it define the rest of my life. So I'd made a choice. I sold the house. I moved to a new city. I started teaching again. I made new friends. I learned to dance. I started over. People talk about second chances like they're rare. But the truth is, every morning is a second chance. Every breath is an opportunity to begin again. It's never too late. That's what I'd learned. It's never too late to change, to grow, to find something worth living for. I looked out at the ocean, at the waves rolling in and out, endless and patient. The world kept turning. The sun kept rising. And so would I. I turned away from the water and walked back toward the lights of the city. My feet left prints in the sand, soon to be washed away by the tide. But I'd been here. I'd stood here. I'd lived. And tomorrow I'd do it again. I smiled. Not because everything was perfect. Not because the pain was gone. But because I was still here. Still breathing. Still moving forward. I was 68 years old. And I was just getting started. If you've stayed with me through this entire family story, I want to leave you with something I learned the hard way. When I was standing on that island at 67, I truly believed my life was about to end. But looking back now, I realize that sometimes the darkest moments in a family story reveal the strength we never knew we had. What felt like the end was actually the beginning of a new life. This family betrayal changed everything I thought I understood about loyalty. Sometimes the deepest wounds come from the people we trust the most. This family betrayal cost me my relationship with my son, but it also forced me to see the truth about myself, about boundaries, and about the choices we make when life tests us. Many people hear a family story like this and assume it's about revenge, but it isn't. Revenge would have destroyed me just as surely as the betrayal itself. What saved me was clarity, courage, and the decision to seek justice instead of letting bitterness control my life. If there's one lesson in this family betrayal, it's this: pay attention to the warning signs. Protect yourself even when it feels uncomfortable. The hardest part of any family betrayal is realizing that love alone cannot fix someone else's greed. Thank you for listening to Elliot's family story, all the way to the end. If this story meant something to you, leave a comment below. Subscribe to the channel and share this video with someone who might need to hear it. Your support truly helps these stories reach more people. And one final note, parts of this narrative include fictionalized elements created for storytelling and educational purposes. If this type of family story isn't for you, feel free to explore other content that better matches your interests.